My wife's mother. Yeah. All right, we are ready to begin. We are a few minutes late, so my apologies. We have the whole council here. I've asked Meryl Frost, no relation to Brad Frost, the mayor of American Fork, to give us our opening prayer, and following which I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Unfortunately, no scout came that I could victimize. Oh, there's one right there. So hold on just a second for the prayer. Cody, can I volunteer your son to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? So following the prayer, if you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be appreciated. All right, there we go. Okay. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity we have to be gathered as citizens and neighbors this evening. We're thankful for the opportunity it affords us to live in this country and in this community where we can meet together in this forum to discuss matters that are close to our hearts, both personally and emotionally, and from a civic perspective. We'd ask a blessing to be upon each one of us, that we can have the spirit of friendship and love this evening. We ask a blessing be upon our elected officials, that they can govern in a manner which is just, and they can be effective as they put forth the will of the citizens and those others who have elected them to these positions. We're again thankful for our many blessings, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Cody, son, Jackson, can you do that? I'm not making you do something you want. Okay, so come up to the podium there. I'll have to take your hat off, and then Jackson, what's your last name? Remind me. Dingus. So Jackson Dingus.
Will the audience please arise? Salute the flag. Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you. That was excellent. We appreciate you doing that. Okay,
Can I just make a comment? I just would like to express my appreciation to the mayor for inviting various members of the public to give the invocation. That has been really inspiring, and I know as a council we appreciate your thoughts and prayers, and so thank you very much for that. Also, I just noticed that the flag is in a different location.
Somebody moved it at a meeting I was attending. I just didn't move it back. So
I had a discussion with him. He and I went out on the internet together. Unless the center flag is higher, it is supposed to be as it's displayed. If they're all the same height, it's always on the person facing the audience right.
I'm not a flag etiquette guy. I just noticed it was different. So.
Yes, and he and I had a discussion about it. So it should be on the person looking at it. It should be on their right. The presenter on their right.
So
unless if the middle flag or if the middle pole is taller, then it should be in the middle. And if you go out here, I believe that it's up higher.
Yes, a little bit.
But that's
so if we put a little
if you
booster
raise it up, stick it in the middle.
Okay.
If not,
all right.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
We all learned something today that I didn't know, and maybe everybody else knew, but I didn't. All right, so we have unscheduled public appearances, and the first unscheduled public appearance is a mayor's discretion item. So bear with me. I'm going to come down. We're going to invite Rusty and Bill Parker, Dr. Bill Parker, to come by the podium, and I have an award for them. For coming up. For those of you that don't know, and I'll just have you guys turn and face the audience, these fine people have served our community for the last 37 years. In 1982, Dr. Parker was the fourth OBGYN to practice here in Highland. He brought an additional 7, is that correct? And when he retired 5 years ago, he had delivered birth to 7,800 babies, some of which were the children that he delivered earlier in his career. The other thing that he did that was novel was every 1,000 babies, it was a free baby. So he donated, and I think that was a generous thing for him to do, and it incented people to have babies to get in line to work with them. They have since retiring, they've served a couple of LDS missions, and they've continued to serve after serving. And so we printed a certificate for them that we will present to them in this folder. It reads, Certificate of Recognition awarded to Dr. Bill and Rusty Parker. Thank you for your devoted service to the community for the past 37 years. You are truly numbered among the heroes of Highland. And I'm going to give that to you. And I have a Heroes of Highland pin. What was our theme last year from the flame? Who remembers our flame theme from last year? Very good. We rise by lifting others. And I thought that was very appropriate to create a pin to award people that I believe have lifted others their entire lives. So I'm giving one of these to you and one of these to you. And that's a memento that you can take with you. And I think we should applaud their service. So last week, Dr. Parker was given an award that went on the Wall of Fame in the American Fork Hospital. Every year they award one doctor who has served the community for at least 20 years. They put him into the Hall of Fame for AF Hospital. Dr. Parker was selected. They currently have about 300 physicians serving right now, so it's a pretty big pool they draw from. I don't know how many of those serve 20 years or more, so there's retired people, but it's quite an honor to be put on that list. And the staff, according to the staff, he was a cherished servant in the hospital. So we thank you for serving, and I just want to do a little small acknowledgement and appreciation for your service. Thank you very much. Of course, now they're condemned to stay the whole meeting. Not just kidding. So we're doing unscheduled public appearances. Just for everybody's notice, we did pull item 4 from the agenda. And so if you have a comment on that item, you'll want to do that up front. The other items, we will take comments on action items as we go through the meeting. And I reserve the discretion to limit comments because I do find that if we go past 10 o'clock, it becomes less productive. So I may limit comment to a specific amount of time on an agenda, so you'll just have to be very succinct in your comments. So we'll start then with unscheduled public appearances. Please state your name, where you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to tell us whatever you think. And we'll sit here and listen.
My comments tonight will be brief. My name is Alan Renscher. You probably know my address. So I'm here tonight and to personally thank the mayor and several members of the council who took the time very generously to meet with me and discuss the plans for the Mountain Ridge Park. I'm here tonight to tell you of my great love for this city and my family and my neighbors. And I acknowledge that members of the city council share that, and that's why they serve. Grateful for your service. The Mountain Ridge Park has been a divisive issue in our community. It has. It's time for us to stop bickering and come together as a community. It's time for us to have a measured plan that includes lots of sports activities in the sports complex. Football, maybe, I don't know. Soccer, maybe, I don't know. Lacrosse, maybe, I don't know. Maybe even some pickleball courts, but hopefully not quite as many. And I'm here to volunteer my services to help with that. I'm here to rally my neighbors to help with that measured plan. I'm here to offer our help as a community to raise funds, to go visit with 2 of the companies I'm on the board on and work hard to raise the funds and the community interest to do this. And I leave that here, and I do it in a spirit of goodwill. And I know that there's a lot of opinions about this, and there's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of energy. But let's have a measured plan that works for what the citizens of our great city want. Thanks.
Thank you. Before you start, that was really good, and I wanted to clap, but when we clap at public comment, then we, in some ways, intimidate anybody else with an opposing view. So this is okay. But smiles, no booing, please. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Michael Bronson. I live at 10639 North Canterbury Drive. And, it's inspiring here to be at the beginning of this meeting. And, it's what kind of a place does somebody, a 14-year-old kid, I assume, walk in and can lead a group in a Pledge of Allegiance, and we open with a inspiring prayer, and then we have a talk like the one we just had. I'm here to talk about issue 4 that was removed. The fact that was even on the agenda tonight seems a little bit at odds with who we are as a city and what I've just witnessed here at the beginning of this meeting. It seems to have come up somewhat in the middle of the night, and a number of us found out about it very late in the game. And it just doesn't seem like in keeping with who we ought to be. There's a lot of concern that there's a desire to revisit this. This is a dynamic issue. I understand that in the last 24 to 48 hours, a number of people have asked to have their names removed from that petition now that they know what the impact is and have a better knowledge of it. I've also studied the petition myself and sent some information to Tara and to Kurt today. I'm not sure that a lot of the people that signed that petition actually own the property that it's stated that they do, if you do a search of the public records. And so I think some of that is problematic. And also, I understand that 2 of the homes that are adjacent to this trail are either now up for sale or under contract, and that one of the property owners, I've heard, has removed her name from the petition as well. And so that, I think, illustrates that this is a dynamic issue, and probably if it's going to be revisited again, ought to be given some time to let things play out and let it be done in a transparent fashion. I do apologize for taking time on an item that was removed from the agenda, but a lot of us had scheduled time to be here anyway once we found out that it was going to be here. So I've now spent 2 nights this week away from my home because I care about this issue, and I'll close my comments and maybe wait for a few minutes, but I'm going to return to be with my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you state your name? I don't remember if you did.
I did. It's Michael Bronson.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Hi, my name is Lowell Nelson, live just over here a couple blocks. I think I know most of you, and I'm pleased to call you my friends. Highland's a wonderful, wonderful place. I saw item 9A, I think, is on the agenda tonight, 2019 election options, I believe. And when I saw that, then I thought I should come in and just give you my opinion. It's been a while since I've been here to visit and do that. I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting. And vote by mail, if offered by the county, is one way we could do ranked choice voting in Highland. Why am I a fan of ranked choice voting? Actually, I wrote this all out in a letter, and then my printer jammed, and so I'm going to go get go to another printer. I'll come back and give you a copy of my letter so you can have some of my notes. But basically, I extol the virtues of a ranked choice ballot. I describe why it's such a good thing. And then suggest that we ought to do that here in Highland. We ought to be helping to pioneer this effort to be a ranked choice, use ranked choice voting. Number one, it allows you to vote for who you really want first. And then if that person gets the least votes, your second choice comes into play. And if he is eliminated or she, then your third choice comes into play. And so you actually have a voice in the final election. Of a person, if there are 3 or more candidates. That's the primary benefit of ranked choice ballot. It's a wonderful thing. And if you instead choose the least popular candidate as your number one choice, using a normal plurality election, then it's over for you. You don't have any more voice in the remaining candidates. That's one of the biggest advantages of a ranked choice ballot. Now, how does that tie in with vote by mail? Well, the county is offering vote by mail, and my understanding is that our election officer is leaning that way, and if we do, that would be a great opportunity to use ranked choice ballots. Now, the legislature passed HB 277, which extended the deadline from January 1st to April 15th, and so if our election officer chooses to do so, to use vote by mail and ranked choice ballot, then she could do so if she made that election before April 15th. So why am I here? I'm here to encourage you, to encourage her to use vote by mail ranked choice balloting in our municipal elections this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Lowell.
Hi, I'm Adam Garrelot from Canterbury North neighborhood. Just wanted to echo what Michael said and ditto to everything he said. And I also wanted to address the concern that I had in how this issue arose so quickly, just 6 weeks after it was originally voted on and brought before the city council. And in looking into the issue, I noticed in reviewing the agenda and the hearings that, there was at least one city council member that had a personal interest in this issue, and I would want to encourage the Highland City Council to consider the ethical obligations of the city council members in something like this, and reconsidering an issue of which they have a personal interest, and review the municipal code. And I would hope that the personal interest was disclosed in a manner, a sworn statement to the mayor as required by the code. Additionally, I read through the municipal code, and I actually submitted a grammar request for the Highland City Council rules of conduct and procedure, and wasn't too impressed about the additional rules of conduct and procedure, and would like to have the city council consider reviewing those rules. And if there's a personal interest, I think it is fair for the city council member to proactively recuse themselves from that consideration of that issue. There's ethical duties as city council members. I know you have, and I know that you do well to follow the municipal code, but I think there's more that we can do in Highland City to address those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to assure everybody in the audience, go ahead and sit down, that anything that needs to be disclosed has been disclosed on any issues that we've covered in the last year.
You also, while you're coming up, go ahead and come up. Just one other thing. The state requires that you disclose. Even if you're disclosing, you still have a right to vote. It doesn't disqualify you. And so even if you disclose you have a conflict of interest, once it's been disclosed, you can vote on anything that you feel like. You have to determine whether you can ethically make a decision without bias. And if you can do that, then you can vote on it. But that's a personal choice that you do, and nobody else can determine that for you.
Okay. Brent, is that your name?
Brent Wallace, North Canterbury Subdivision, and I have to admit I feel a little bit like a yo-yo, because 3 days ago we found out there was going to be an agenda item, and then probably less than 6 hours ago we found out it was taken off. So we don't know whether we're coming or going on item 4, but I wanted to make some comments so we can hopefully get this closer to resolution. We think that the petition process is extremely flawed. There must be an expiration date on this. My credit cards have expiration dates, my driver's license has expiration dates, my gift cards have expiration dates. But we do a petition and it goes on forever. It has no death. It's like Jason in Halloween, it just keeps coming back. So there's got to be a reasonable expiration date for a ballot petition. Petition should have a written text that must be given to the signee. Of the 20 people that have removed their name, 100% of them said that they didn't know what they signed. They signed it because a neighbor asked them to sign it. So there needs to be something that is given to someone so they have a written text, they know what they signed. That seems to be a very flawed, because there's no way of knowing what actually was expressed to that person about this process. The petition was for removal of the trail behind 4 homes, 8 total, back to back. But the intent by the committee and some commissioners was for the entire trail to be removed eventually. If that was the intent, the petition should have reflected that in the first place. I have signature list. Here's one page that has nothing on the heading. These signatures could be applied to anything. It doesn't address what they're signing. A lot of them have the Canterbury North subdivision, but that is all. I request that the Open Space Committee be dissolved as it currently stands. It is obvious from agenda items and spoken comments that many of its members do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the open space subdivisions. The fact that this ended up on the agenda 3 days ago, there's 2 members that had to request that. Those are 2 members that are on the open space subcommittee, and they did it with extremely short notice during spring break. Very, very odd. One member has a vested interest in removal of trails. I would be interested in seeing the agenda and the minutes for the last 2 years of the Open Space Committee's meetings to find out what exactly they are discussing. The process causes extreme animosity. When one person signs and his neighbor doesn't, there's immediately created animosity between those 2 neighbors. And that's not what Highlands is all about, is being at odds with each other. Anyway, I'll close with 2 council members. Obsession with removing trails is doing extensive damage to our neighborhood's cohesiveness, our friendship, and our very essence of who we are as Highlanders. I'd ask for those city council members that are so obsessed about this trail removal, consider the damage they are causing in the neighborhoods in which they are trying to remove trails. Thank you.
Hi, Sherry Kramer, Highland. I just wanted to say thank you so much for agreeing to keep the noise and the traffic studies on the agenda, because I think they are needed, even if we move forward with a different plan. There's a lot of traffic there, and I think when we have sports and things like that, there's still going to be a lot of traffic. So it would be good to know how much and what we need to do to do some abatement, and also the noise as well. I also want to tell you that I am happy to help with getting Mountain Ridge Park going as well, and I am happy to go meet with companies and to try to get donations. I love what Pleasant Grove is doing for Discovery Park. They're getting thousands of people over there to help build that park again. They did it the first time, I think they said 20 plus years ago, and it was awesome. I took my kids there when they were little, and I actually want to go and help this time as well. And I think we should do something like that here in Highland as well when we do Mountain Ridge Park, and just get everybody really excited about it and get some volunteers as well as donations from companies. And I think we're going to get a lot of people on board with this. I would also like to mention that I would suggest doing 6 courts over here, 6 pickleball courts at Mountain Ridge, and maybe 4 at another park, either on the east or in some other neighborhoods, so that everybody can have access to some pickle courts near their home. And also make sure that we do the noise abatement, even if we just do 4, even if we do 6, do some noise abatement. I know berms are great. Over in our park, we've got some berms, and the kids love it in the wintertime because they can use it for sledding as well. So it's got dual purpose in the summer and also in the winter. I would also like to say that last weekend I went to my son's chillax tournament. It's a lacrosse tournament for the freshman and sophomore kids over at Art Dye. And he was one of the last teams to play, which was pretty exciting. But while he was playing, I probably shouldn't have done this, but I went around and counted all the cars in the parking lot at Art Dye. There were 2 fields going on at the same time, just 2, and there were 200 cars in that parking lot. And this is for freshmen and sophomore teams who not all of them drive. And so we need to bear that in mind when we do these fields, that we maybe, when we sign contracts, let Highland City be the determining factor. If it becomes too busy, if we have more than 2 fields going and there's more than 200 cars out there, that we can say, look, we need to stagger the games so that we don't have so many at the same time if we put more than 2 fields over there. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
We may have already heard from me enough, and on this topic as well, I just wanted to weigh in really quickly on the open trail discussion which was pulled. My name is Merrill Frost. I'm on 6769 Canterbury Lane. The main concern I have is the way that this is being carried out. It's been a mere 41 days since the last vote on this issue, and it seems a little premature and a little clandestine to have this go on in the manner in which it's going on. I believe the other speakers and commenters have covered most of the issues that I would also have concern with. Just want to let you guys know that we have great respect and great trust in what you guys do for the city. I truly believe each and every one of you have the city's best interest at heart. It's just a little unnerving when we get to these situations where we see votes going back and forth and allegations and different things such as this. So we'd just encourage you to continue the fight, but know that this is an issue that needs to be well vetted out and very transparent. I know there are a lot of things at play, people's desires. We have a lot of issues with revenues and expenditures that could be brought up. And so all those things I believe need to be put on the table in a well thought out pattern. Perhaps even allow some of us as members of the community to sit in and weigh in and provide ideas on how we can get this thing taken care of in an amenable fashion to everybody. I'd also just publicly like to thank Councilman Osler. I called a couple of you today, was able to get a hold of him. He let me bend his ear for about 15 minutes, and I appreciate the manner in which you take us as citizens into account and the way you communicate and you made me feel after though. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, Vanessa Moody from Highland, and I'm with the Friends of Mountain Ridge Park Coalition. And I just wanted to talk for a quick sec about the time that I've taken the last few months with the Friends of Mountain Ridge Park, and talking to Highland residents and getting an idea and getting feedback on what people are excited about with the park and maybe not so excited about the park. And we had an overwhelming response to the amount of people that felt that 27 courts were just too much, a national pickleball tournament facility. And here I have over 700 signatures, plus those that are in households, multiples, of people that are against the 27 pickleball courts. And it just says that we, the undersigned, do not support a 27-court pickleball tournament facility at Mountain Ridge Park. And I asked a lot of people what they would like, and I directed them to your guys' great survey that you guys put out there. I thought that was a wonderful idea, that the city did that, and I hope that our voices are heard. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is I'm not against pickleball. I love pickleball. I love playing pickleball, and I would love to see some pickleball courts in there. I hope that we have a more balanced approach to this park and that we get the community involved and have it be a positive, just uniting the community, and especially maybe an all abilities playground. I think that would be awesome. And I'm willing to help, and I know a lot of people that I talk to were willing to help throughout the community. So anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you.
Carly Tall. You probably already have my address. So I am here just to tell you why I'm excited. I think that this is an opportunity to rejoice. I feel like those surveys came out and said, we're not all like crazy people saying this is not what we want. Like, this is a united community, and this is the opportunity to unite friends and households and really come together, like Sherry was saying about building the park and going to build the one, is it Pleasant Grove, the Discovery Park? I feel like that's what this community needs. Before this happened, whatever we're gonna call this, I did not know neighbors that were 4 houses above mine because I am LDS, and that's the ward boundaries, and that's how it goes. I didn't know my neighbors. I now have way more friends than I started with. I have 12 people on a text chain, that I would call on for dinner if I needed it. These are my friends. I really love them. And I feel like that's what Highland is about. And this park could be our heritage. It could be our legacy. I feel like everybody's excited about the idea of an all abilities park. I feel like if we're talking about phase 1 and giving people in phase 1 what they're going to be happy with, that's where we're going to go, is the all abilities park. I've not talked to one person who hasn't said, I'm in, sign me up. How can I help? We will do this, and we will unite. And then in phase 2, we'll do pickleball. And we'll all be happy about that. But phase 1 should be the all abilities park. I'm excited. I think everybody behind me is excited. And I feel like it's time to move on and be friends and get along. Let's have a party. Let's just press forward and celebrate with this energy. Because all these people that I now know, we all have energy. And we all are thinking, where are we going to go with this? What are we going to do? So I ask you to help continue uniting us and get the ball rolling and give us that green light tonight to say, yes, go get that funding. We're on board. So, I also wanted to say real fast, as far as that, what are they calling it? The ranked voting? This is my thought on this. People like the man who spoke, I wish I could tell you his name. I feel like it'd be amazing for him because he knows his stuff. Most people my age, they vote for who they see on that billboard. They don't know. So if you ask them who they're voting for, maybe they have one guy that they're like, okay, I kind of like him. The others, they don't know. So their second, third, fourth, fifth choice, it's not going to be very educational. It's not going to get us the people we want. That's why I'm against it. I think if you're talking on a national level, great. We all know the big headliners and why we like them or why we don't. And the city council level, it was hard for me when I voted this last time to really like or dislike any of you. I didn't know you. I didn't know anything about you. Saw a few credentials, still didn't tell me enough. It was kind of like, well, I hope I voted okay. So I feel like on this level, it's just not going to benefit us. So anyway, thank you for all that you do. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Natalie Ball on Atlas Drive. And I just feel compelled to tell you how disappointed I am that we're now at nearly a year since you came to my neighborhood with your open space trail issue, and you divided my neighborhood with petitions that nobody understood, that didn't have dates on them. The application hadn't even been filed at the time they were taking a petition around. This process is so flawed, and it's so disappointing to me that a year later we're still having this discussion. And it's disappointing to me that with wonderful neighbors like this, that really want to be friends and want to be united, that we're going into neighborhoods with an issue that doesn't exist for a lot of people and creating an issue and pitting neighbors against each other and signing petitions because my home teacher brought it to me or the bishop signed it or whatever. It's not a fair system. It doesn't work. And I'm so sad for the Canterbury neighborhood because you've already divided my neighborhood, and the same people that wouldn't talk to me now wouldn't have talked to me if I'd filed a referendum on you a year ago, and I wish I'd done it. I'm really disappointed. I thank you for your service, but I really think we need to rethink the Open Space Committee and what it's doing to our neighborhoods. Send the bill for the $20 open space fee to the whole city. I talked to people out in the foyer at the last meeting that said, yes, we use those trails. We will pay towards those trails. We are happy to pay towards them. Our kids use them all the time. It's not fair to them to pay the $20 fee when our kids use it. We'd be happy to pay a $20 fee. I think you should either institute it citywide, upkeep the trails, let's stay Highland. Why do we have to keep changing a system that isn't really broken for most of us? Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Doug Courtney, and I'm speaking to you tonight as a citizen of Highland. Apologies to Mayor and Council that you have seen the text of this, but several people asked me to please speak at the council meeting for the record, so here I am. We've all seen the coverage of the recent college bribery scandal. As a community, we've been dismayed at the unfolding details. We ask, how could this happen? How could these trusted officials go along with such a scheme? Perhaps most of all, how could somebody feel such a sense of entitlement that they thought that this would seem okay? I recently spoke with Nathan Crane, and he pointed out that the city has such limited resources that we must sometimes choose which laws to follow and which to ignore. This is not the fault of our fine city staff. The fault is ours. As residents of Highland, we enjoy our wonderful city. We enjoy our low property tax rate. We enjoy our parks and our open spaces, even if they do sometimes appear a little scruffy. Our nation has a huge financial debt because our government routinely spends more than it collects. Yet there are multiple types of debt. In Highland, we are currently paying down the maintenance debt on our roads because for too long, we paid too little attention to their needs. We have a growing debt, let's call it a burnout debt, among our public works staff, because for too long, we've expected them to do too much with too little. And although not strictly financial, these debts are real. Too often, we build debt by feeling entitled to things that we have not fully owned. So I think about those implicated in the bribery scandal, and it shames me to stand before you tonight and admit that I, too, am cut from this same cloth. I have felt entitled to the benefits of Highland. I think the Adopt a Patch program is valuable, yet I have never volunteered. When I see trash while walking our city trails, I do not often pick it up. I hear problems facing the city, yet too often I'm silent, waiting for others to take action. I, too, am cut from that same sad cloth. And when looking frankly in the mirror, I feel that many residents would have to make this same admission. So I speak tonight to encourage you, our elected officials and our city staff, to work together and to lead us to a better place. Aggressively promote citizen volunteerism and look for new ways to use volunteers for the betterment of Highland. When I think of cities that are heralded for their greatness, I think of large cities. I think of cities with fabulous museums and cultural sites. I think of cities that attract visitors from around the globe. But then I realize that a city's greatness can be more properly found in her people. How much they care, and how much that caring moves them to action. If we work together, if we pull together, if we contribute our time instead of only grudgingly our treasure, we can make Highland one of the truly great cities. And we need you to lead us there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wayne Tanaka, live at Toscana, across the street. Doug brought up a good point about volunteerism. I'd like to share with you a fact that Provo City is the #1 volunteer city in the United States. They have a volunteer coordinator and a tremendous program to allow that many volunteers across the board. Parks, recreation, community center, all kinds of stuff. I would highly recommend that you check them out on why they are so great at volunteerism. The biggest volunteer community in the United States, just down the road. And taking the points that Doug has made, I think if we just did a fraction of what they've accomplished, we could do a lot to sustain our parks, our trails. It sounds like some trails need a little handy care. So anyway, my point is, volunteerism is a huge resource for any community. And we have a lot of people that are community-minded in Highland, as you all know. This is a pioneer community. You help one another. That's what America is all about, community. And I think if we look at the volunteerism program of some level, I think we could do a lot to maintain our trails, our parks, but you have to make a concerted effort to get somebody of a leadership capabilities, or at least in their heart, like some of the folks have spoken to you this evening, there are people willing to volunteer and to lead, and to be leaders. So thank you for your time, and volunteerism is something that can really supplement the city's budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
else?
could I make a brief statement?
Sure.
I just want to add a little insight into the open space issue. I'm fairly confident the number of the comments were directed at me personally. I've chaired the Open Space Committee since its inception in 2011. The committee has spent hours and hours of time evaluating the best way to address these issues. We've looked at many different options, maintenance agreements, having the city assume more responsibility. The ultimate decision was made in 2013. 3 members of this current city council actually approved the ordinance for disposal of neighborhood option trails. And by the way, that ordinance was passed unanimously by the entire city council. The Open Space Committee was involved in helping with that, but the city council actually passed that ordinance at that time. The issue as we've gone forward, the open space has been confronted with a number of issues for a long time. I've lived in Highland now almost 17 years, and it's been a problem since I moved into my subdivision. One member of the city, some members of the city council have suggested that the city is not a good neighbor. I know many of you who have complained live adjacent to to open space, but not many of you, I shouldn't say not many, many of you don't live next to a trail that's not maintained adequately. Some of you do, and the ordinance requires a majority, not a simple majority, but a significant majority of the neighborhood to bring petitions forward. In the case of the Canterbury subdivision, it requires over 65% of the neighborhood, which is not a simple majority, but a significant majority. It requires over 75% of the people adjacent to the trail. So this is not something that is taken lightly. Now, there may be some question as to the validity of the signatures, and I'm not here to address that at this point. But in terms of my personal interest dates back to when I moved into the city, trying to fix a problem that was very difficult to live next to. I don't have a personal interest in the Canterbury subdivision other than to help fix a problem. I'm more than happy to take your criticism for trying to fix a problem that many people have been facing for years. The other point that I would make is, again, the agenda item this evening was not an actionable item for the petition. It was an action item just to consider the petition again. If it had passed this evening, there would be public notices and there would be an additional public meeting held subsequent to this meeting. So there was nothing clandestine or backdoor or anything else intended with the meeting tonight. We have to comply with all legal requirements, and so tonight was just an opportunity to vote to determine whether or not we wanted to reconsider it. Everybody would have been given adequate time to make comments, to attend an additional public meeting. Anyway, I just wanted to share that perspective from you. And again, the other point that I would make is that, again, it requires a majority of the residents. Now, what does that mean for the minority of the residents who don't particularly care for this action? I would suggest that at some point in time, to draw the community together, the minority has to compromise. Now, that is a 4-letter word for many people, but for democracy to function properly, there has to be compromise. Some people, again, would accuse me of a 4-letter word when I suggest compromise, but at some point in time, the majority of the people, the issues that affect the majority of the people have to be addressed in a satisfactory way. Again, you're more than happy to disagree with me, but the majority of the people do support this process, have supported it, and those that have completed the process and have purchased the property have been successful in resolving issues that have lingered now for years. So I would hope that you would consider that going forward in terms of the criticism that you're making of this issue. And I would hope that all of you would support the majority of your neighborhoods as these issues continue to linger in many of the open space subdivisions. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we have a number of items on the consent agenda. Approval of meeting minutes. Thank you, Bill and Rusty. We appreciate you coming. First item is approval of minutes. Second item is adoption of Highland City Municipal Code, Section 2.4.130, applicant background checks. Next is reappointment and consultant contract for Von Pickle as the Highland City Appeal Authority. Item D is amended interlocal agreement with Utah County on the 4800 West project. And the last item is approval of Spring Creek Highland Plat A preliminary plat.
I ask that we pull E, please.
Any others? Poll E.
Yes.
I would move to approve items A through D in the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Just a quick question, Mayor. Could we have just a brief discussion on B?
So we'll pull B2 then.
Okay, I'll amend my motion. I move that we approve the consent calendar A, C, D, right?
I'll second it again.
Okay.
And E?
Not E.
Not E. Brian pulled that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, are we voting on the thing?
Or do we want to vote?
It's ready, Mayor, if
I
you'd
got it
like
to
to do
work.
that.
Oh, hey. All right, and we can see it. We used to, just for your information, this screen hasn't worked for a number of months, and now it works, so we can see what you see up there.
I vote yes.
So,
You ready for comments?
Mayor, that motion passes 5-0.
5-0. Okay, so now, item B. What were you looking for?
Just a quick question for you, Tim. Typically, when there are background checks, you get the consent of the individual being reviewed, and then you also can request a copy of the background if the individual so requested. Is that, I didn't see that specifically in this.
It does state that we have to get a waiver, a written
waiver.
So they sign it. As far as the copy, I'm not sure how to address that, but I can look into it.
Typically, that's an option on that waiver document, that if they want a copy, they can get a copy. I just wanted to make sure.
So the waiver that we have is something that the BCI has approved, that we
Okay.
use. It's a template that they use. I know that we give them the opportunity to contest anything if something comes up and they say that's not accurate. I'm with Tim. I'm not sure about the copy itself.
Yeah, typically, at least in the bank where I work, we give the employees an option. If they want a copy, they can get a copy. And maybe that's just a courtesy on our part, but it'd be nice if people wanted it, they could at least see what's happening.
I am happy to report on all of the background checks we've run. Nothing has come up, so.
Yeah, we're happy to offer a copy if they would like one.
They seldom do, but it's just nice to offer
It's nice, absolutely, to say it's clean.
So,
Let's take item E, and then
Okay.
we can hit both of them.
okay, let's do that. So item E, Brian?
The reason why I wanted to pull this is, and I apologize, I would normally try to get this done beforehand. As you can see, this is my computer for the day because my other computer died, so all my notes and everything else are having problems. In here, in the background, and the reason why it's important is because not only E here, but also item number 6 has the same background. The background says, in October 2007, there were 12 acres of property. I'm abbreviating this significantly. It says at that time, it was the city's intent to develop this property as a park. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints, there have not been sufficient funds to allow for its development. My understanding and my reason for selling that property was not because of budget constraints. We could have sat on that property for another 10 years. For me, the issue had more to do with that the property was not appropriate for the size of park, the access to it. There were budget constraints that kept it from coming. but I think for the record, I think that needs to be in there. I think that's an important item because in the future, if anyone were to go here or to item 6 as a background, I think that's an important enough issue to have that change so that it was clear on that item.
So you want to amend the staff report?
I would amend the background information to state that it was not due to budget constraints that it was held back or we did not build that park. It had to do with the traffic and the type of park in that neighborhood and access to that park were the primary reasons. Not to say that the budget constraints were not a reason.
I think to jump in, at least from my perspective, it just says because of budget constraints, we haven't had funding for the development of the park.
But Councilman Braithwaite's right. There are some other issues that kind of mitigate the reasons. I mean, they're really, if we tried to develop that park at 12 acres there, the traffic and things would have been horrendous.
With small residential roads accessing it, and basically it's one road on one side.
I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, the purpose of that was just to say, hey, you know, we haven't had money to build a park. Now, if the council would like us to amend it, include it in the minutes, that's fine. It's not a huge issue.
So it sounds to me like we need an amendment on the B to say the city agrees to provide background checks, if a copy of the background check if requested, and that you want the background to be amended to include the reason that you stated. Is that right?
Correct.
Correct.
Somebody want to make that motion?
As well as the same amendment would go for item 6 that we have. It's the same background information for the park approval for the conditional use.
Does somebody want to attempt to do both? And
I
we can
move
approve?
that we make those amendments to B and E.
I'll second that
as
motion.
proposed.
Sounds good.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it was seconded. Aaron, can we vote? Okay. There's still time to beat Brian.
Okay.
Nope.
Yes.
Okay.
Been trying to update it all night.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is item 3, action approval of surplus and disposal of personal public property and equipment.
Mayor Joanna is stepping in for Todd on this item here.
Oh, so we got an upgrade.
I don't know about that, but I'm happy to present this item to you tonight. As he said, this action item number 3 is for the declaration of certain equipment and office items that have either become antiquated, replaced, or outdated. And we are asking that they be classified as surplus so that we can dispose of them as per our municipal code guidelines. Some of these items are taking up valuable space within not only our offices here, but also up at Public Works. And we wish to dispose of them in a responsible way that will benefit the city and others through the public surplus website, which is where we disposed of the trucks previously last fall. Are there any questions about the items that have been listed on our asset disposal list?
I would approve that we accept the proposal to surplus and dispose of the personal public property and equipment as recommended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready for a vote. And while they're voting, I would just like to point out to the public that there are 4 46-inch flat screen TVs awaiting a home. Now, they're very heavy.
And they are 10 years old.
And they're 10 years old, so they don't have HDMI ports. But maybe they could be used for target practice or some other.
I think they have value, so we're not going to go that far as using them for target practice, but I do invite the public to look at that website. It's called publicsurplus.com, and it has surplus items offered by municipalities as well as colleges and school districts and things like that. So that's where these items will go. And so if you're interested in them, make sure you check out that website.
So we are ready for a vote, if for those of you that haven't voted on.
We already
Oh, we
voted.
did.
It's
And it
done.
passed unanimously. All right. I missed it, sorry. Okay, next item is approval of Mountain Ridge Park master design process.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you know, okay, keep one more. I'll let Aaron, one more. Okay, so in order to discuss this project, the first thing we have to talk about is current status. As you know, we've been working on a master plan since November. We've had quite a bit of public comments, some of which additional that you heard this evening. The master plan was completed and approved by council in January. With the council's direction, we went forward and started our 60% drawing set. What that means is we're taking the construction plans to a 60% level for our staff review. That would include everything but the complex that you see outlined there. So we do have the 60% plans that staff currently has. We've been holding on the review pending the outcome of this. We've spent approximately, let me get the exact number for you on the budget. In November, the council did hire a design firm to design the master plan and do the construction drawings. Of that budget, we have spent approximately, oh, it was email. My apologies. Approximately $36,000 of that budget so far. Can you go to the next slide, please, Aaron? Thank you. We've come up with options that we could do. We could proceed as previously directed by the council. We could start a new master plan process. We could take the information that we've gathered through the surveys we've done, through the open houses, and regarding amenities and so forth, and revise the current master plan, and then hold an open house and present that to the public. The approximate cost for that is, if we were to go with option 2, it'd be an extra $15,000. Option 1 would be half of that, depending on how many concepts and things that we do. In speaking with staff and with the consultant, we believe that, can you go back? Sorry. If you look at the master plan, really parking area, we still want access off 10400 North, the main access there, so the parking will probably stay the same as far as its location. The field location will probably remain the same. Really, it's the area in between. So we think we can do some modifications to it, that area, and perhaps don't need a complete redesign of the site. So we're looking for your direction and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So before we have questions, I will, if there's anybody else that wants to speak to this issue, you're welcome to. I'll limit it to like 10 minutes, but if nobody else wants to speak, I'm fine. It seems like most of you spoke earlier. Okay?
10 minutes per person?
No, total.
I'll be quick.
The timer is starting.
My name's Amy Jones, and I just am building a house in the cul-de-sac right by this park. So I just would hope that as city council members that you would really take seriously the survey that was sent to residents of Highland, where 60% of people, I don't remember, it was 60-something% of Highland residents opposed this pickle court facility. And just really, I understand.
Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you, but that's not what the survey said.
Oh, sorry.
They're opposed to all sports tournaments.
You're right.
Okay.
Yes.
So that means soccer, that means all these others. You can't have soccer tournaments in there either.
Right.
If that's what we understand. So.
Okay. Yeah, so I just hope that you would take that into consideration as you move forward with the plan and come up with a park that maybe isn't for tournaments, but that has a few pickleball courts, that has places that soccer games could be held, but maybe not tournament level competitions. And so I know that you've already spent money, you've already spent time, and it's hard to kind of go backwards and relook at things, but I hope that since the survey was sent out and you have kind of gotten the mind of Highland residents, that you will take that into consideration and take that seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm passionate, guys. I'm passionate about this. So looking at this plan, the thoughts that come to my mind is I don't think that we can use it the way that it is, simply because if the All Abilities Park is number one, which obviously I think it should be, I think that we need to watch who's coming to these parks and how they respond to the pickleball and make sure that they are in correct placement. So you don't have kids that are autistic and have Down syndrome, things like that, that cannot be around those kinds of noises and things like that. I think that that is something we really need to look at and be aware of, and like making sure that it's very accessible to the parking lot. You don't want it way far back or whatever. So I think that we need to, now, I mean, if we're gonna redo this, we don't have to like be fast at it, right? We can just take our time and figure out those implications and all of that. And also, I wanted to share an idea with you that another friend said. She said, you know, we've got these amazing universities around us. Why don't we throw this problem at them? There's gotta be a senior project somewhere. There's gotta be a team somewhere that's looking for a project at BYU or the U who could take this on, some sort of city planning or landscaping or something, and say, come up with some ideas for us, guys. Like, there's people who have connections at those universities. It's an idea, because I know I hear $36,000 and my jaw just drops. That's a lot of money. I get that we're not like playing games here. This is a big deal to have to redraw this. So I'm just thinking, what else could we do? There's gotta be something else so we're not draining the city funds, going over this time and time and time again. But when I look at this, I'm just thinking about the All Abilities Park and what the implications are of this for those kids that I really want to be building the park for. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cody Dingus, Mayor and City Council, I really appreciate you holding this tonight. I appreciate all that you're doing, and I want to echo what Carly said, like, it's time to come together. I want to commit myself to helping with this park and making it something that we can all enjoy and love. I'm so excited about the potential that's there. I've done several fundraising events in my career. I'd love to help with that and make sure that this happens. I'm really excited about that. The one ask I would have is reconsidering the location of the maintenance building. If it is required to be on this land, could we move it a little bit away from the houses? My backyard is right there, so that's my interest there. So. Anyway, thank you. Look forward to working with you guys on this. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Just really quickly, I just want to reiterate the parking situation. Like I said, with those two fields that were having games at the same time, and those 200 cars, I believe there was 178 parking spots as is. We don't want the whole park in parking, obviously, but we just need to make sure that there's enough parking for everyone so that people aren't parking in neighborhoods and off the street causing issues. So we just need to make sure we're careful with that. Thank you.
You need our name?
Yes, please.
Robert Williams, in the neighborhood, and I know I've emailed many of you several times on the Mountain Ridge, and I appreciate your patience and your understanding and the fact that you're listening. As I keep saying that, you know, we keep trying to go forward. You mentioned that you've already spent $36,000. I don't think that's wasted if you consider we're getting to the appropriate next step. If that's the money that it takes, if we're looking at spending anywhere from $5 to $6-7 million, the fact that you got to spend some money to find out what's going on and to come up with plans is well worth the investment when you consider the overall cost. The fact that we're making a decision or talking about it when we haven't even gotten the results of the noise and the traffic, I kind of wonder, where are we going? Why are we talking about this? Why not? That hasn't been presented yet. for information to say, is this really the appropriate time to be saying, let's take a, let's take it up, make an approval of this master plan. But I think the residents have spoken. The numbers are there. I think the idea that having 27 pickleball courts does not make sense for Highland. And so we appreciate your consideration and hope you continue to keep listening to the residents and doing the right thing and keeping it very transparent as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, council, discussion.
Nathan, do we know the status of the traffic and noise study?
They're currently underway. We've started taking traffic counts, and so the studies are currently underway.
Because I would tend to agree with the last comment that I'm not sure that we can make a good decision without that information. So I would lean more towards continuing this until after that study is completed.
So what we're voting on, if I understand right, is a process to continue. So we could say, go with the plan as is, or we could say, let's take input, let's put a plan together. And I think that would be consistent to taking input from those studies. I don't think that has to preclude that.
So one of the concerns, if we move forward with the traffic study and noise and the plan changes, does our traffic and noise change? So if we're going to change the plan, I think it would be important to have the traffic study and noise fit what our plan is versus we go out there, we get a traffic study and noise for 27 pickleball courts. What information do we know from those studies? Unless we're planning to move forward with the 27 pickleball courts. One other question I'd have is for Brian. There's been some fundraising that's been going on. I think it'd be important to know if we modify the plan, let's assume we go to 8 pickleball courts. What type of funds do we have? What would disappear? What would stay committed? What do we kind of see on the fundraising side where that might be?
This is my first time in Lindsay.
You need to, typically no, but go ahead, because we had, if you were too shy, you have to come up and state your name.
Thank you. Sorry, this is my first time here.
Welcome.
Thanks. I just am wondering, how does traffic matter if they're doing it in the wintertime versus like a summertime tournament when this would happen? I don't know, does it make
Well, there's no
difference?
park there, so it.
Well, there is. I mean, there is the neighborhood there.
The
Are they doing
neighborhood's
the
there.
traffic for the neighborhood, or are they doing traffic estimated for what would happen with the 27
We're doing
courts?
Estimated.
We would be doing a current count on what is, and then there would be an estimate made
On that.
to what will be.
So it
And now
doesn't
is a good-
determine what time of year or anything like that?
It's better to do it when school is on.
Right.
Because that's when you have more traffic.
Okay, thanks.
It's an excellent question. I mean, I don't know that people think through that. The concept is we know about what the traffic is based upon the number of fields, the type of activities, so you just impose that on what the current traffic is. That's how you get there. To answer your question, Kurt, I think you need to make the assumption that there will be no funds available from the fundraising. Now, that doesn't mean that some couldn't come available, that some people may want to continue, but all of the donations to date, there was an expectation of this pickleball tournament, the facilities being a certain size, and other kinds of expectations. So every single one of those individuals would have to be approached again and say, here's the change, are you still interested? I don't know what percentage. I would say it would be a small percentage, but I think some would still consider it. But I think you have to make the assumption that none would and hope that some would.
But I guess when we're saying we can sound like there's 900,000 sitting there we might lose, is there still 25,000 sitting in the account that was there, that came in as cash? I mean, as we look at cash, are we only having 25,000 cash committed? The rest are commitments that maybe have been written agreements or just verbal agreements?
I think that there were discussions with individuals who submitted that, and they would have to be approached. I think that it comes from different people, and they would just have to be approached.
But how much cash, the cash, how much cash do we have in there right now? I mean, let's get some real situations where we're at right now before
It's
we start.
approximately 25,000.
So we have 25,000 in. how much do we have that's written
Yeah.
agreement commitment?
Ed knows how much is in it.
I don't have the exact amount, but it is more than 25. It's probably closer to 30, but it.
There's close to $30,000 in the Highland Foundation.
But it's approximate. I mean,
And
it's
again,
not
some-
100.
Some of that is contingent upon the restriction that they donated. It was donated for the pickleball courts. If they don't go through, then they could withdraw that money.
I'm not aware that that's going to happen.
Withdraw it?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that.
Well, they have the option. I mean,
Out of the
it's-
30,000, we ask, how many does that count as donors? Are we saying there's one large donor that put 25 and we have 100 that gave the other 5,000? I mean, are we talking, in the donation, are we talking one or two large donors, or what do we?
I don't think 25,000 is enough, that even if it was one donation.
It would build one pickleball court.
Yeah, it's.
And I'm
small.
pretty sure those donors are not going to pull their funds.
And I'm pretty sure Scott is right.
And part of that is coming in through PayPal. And we're not, the particular donation account in PayPal is anonymous, so we don't know how many are included in that group.
Well, if you're looking for direction, from my opinion was, I would pull back on the traffic study until we know what we're really moving forward with. I've already voiced that I'm not in favor of the 27 pickleball courts. I don't see that being what the Highland residents. I know there's some that say, hey, personally, I think the survey was geared because they knew what was being presented by the city council, and so that survey came back to say they don't want a tournament-style pickleball inside Highland. I don't know if it's, that they're not going to be amenable to having some competition soccer or things that way, but I would move that we maybe consider doing 8 pickleball courts and not be going after the 27 pickleball courts, that we would look, either use that existing plan or kind of go back and start fresh to make sure everything fits in.
I'd like to make some comments if I could. So we need to talk about how the 27 courts came to be. And Councilman Braithwaite spent a lot of time on committees, and there's been a lot of different discussions in the open houses. But the 27 courts would enable some tournaments, and the feeling was is most of this park's going to have to be built with donations. And because we only have maybe Nate, you can tell us about what we're expecting from the Spring Creek Park, maybe $700,000? Or
about 9. So total, we have about 1.6 total.
I know, but $500,000 of that goes into building the Spring Creek Park.
Sorry.
And then it's 60/40. So my estimation is about $700,000 or something for this park.
So our total budget for the park itself right now is about 1.6 between the sources that the council has identified. So it's about 700. You're correct. It's about 700 to 900 for the from Spring Creek.
That could go into the
Yes,
Mountain Ridge Park.
Correct. Yes.
Some other sources.
And there's some other sources of things. But the bottom line is for most of this stuff to happen anytime soon, and the plan was to make this park happen in phases, is that we need to do some fundraising. And the pickleball supporters came forth and said, if we build this tournament-sized court, we can raise a fair amount of money. And they do have commitments from a lot of people. Unfortunately, as I've talked with Lorna Reed, who's been kind of a principal player in this, I said, the problem, Lorna, is we don't have the cash that we need. I mean, we've got commitments, but not the cash. So I'm a strong supporter of having some pickleball courts there. And I think the reason for that, as an older physician, is pickleball. No, I'm talking about pickleball courts there, and I'm not going to tell you numbers particularly. But as an older physician, the nice thing about pickleball is that it can be played by all ages. So soccer fields, I'm not opposed to soccer fields or baseball diamond or other amenities there. My concern is a lot of those sports become spectator sports after about the age of 40, 45 for most people. And I think we need some options besides just trails for people to participate in activities in the city. Now, I jogged down to the Art Dye Trail from where I live. I live in southeast Highland. They have 6 pickleball courts there. and people are lined up, and it doesn't matter what time of the day or night, people are lined up to use them. I have some employees that live next to the pickleball courts in Alpine. I think they have 4 official ones. People are lined up to use them. I think there's a demand for pickleball. Now, I don't really, if the pickleball supporters had come forth with, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million in that, I think we'd have a different discussion tonight. But I firmly believe we need some pickleball there, and I think we can look at this plan and make some amendments to it, maybe move the All Abilities Park closer to the street or in a more central location. But I want to correct something. I sit on the board for the USDC, the Developmental Center. American Fork City is going to build a fire station in the middle of the autism housing. And we studied that pretty carefully. I can't imagine that pickleball players are going to be noisier than a fire station. So I think saying that we can't have pickleball there because we're going to have an all abilities park is not based on, I think it's based on opinion and maybe doesn't follow. So we have to think about autistic kids that use the park, but at the same time, if we can build a fire station in the middle of the autistic housing, I think we can have pickleball courts. But I would support a minimum of 8 and up to 12 pickleball courts. Now, once again, 4 pickleball courts eat 1 tennis court. We're talking about building 2 to 3 tennis courts, basically. And I'd like to see a tennis court or 2 in there as well, because I've had people come to me and say, hey, we'd like some tennis as well. The big problem is, and what we were hoping to do by having the tournament concept, is that we generate some funds to maintain things, because the problem is the city, once again, does not have funds to properly maintain things. And so they were hoping that would be a way to raise some funds. So if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at the same time, anything we build there, we've got to have a plan to maintain things. So in 8 to 9 years, we're going to have all the bonds paid off. We'll have a lot of money that are going to bond payments that we can use, but that's still 8, 9 years in the future. So whatever we decide tonight on amending the plan, I think we need to kind of take into the concept or planning of ways that we're going to maintain whatever we build. So that's just my feeling, but I do support having some pickleball courts there at least.
So let me just share, I think one of the things that we could decide tonight is to have staff go back, take the input we received, come up with something that we again go through a review process on. So we're not necessarily deciding what's in or out of the park tonight. We could, but we don't have, my preference, I don't have a vote, but my preference would be to
But I don't understand how they can do plans if they don't have some ideas what we'd like to see in the park.
Yeah, but they will take input from the survey and from us, and so I think it's appropriate to share what we are interested in, and that's fine. We don't have to make we're not making a final decision tonight necessarily.
Sure.
Any other discussion?
I think it's been an interesting dialogue, interesting ride over the last several months. I'm not a pickleball player. I've learned a whole lot about pickleball. One of the things that I think is important is having the study done on noise, but not for the reasons that most people believe. There's going to be noise no matter what we put. This is a sports complex, and I've stated that many times. You guys, those of you I've met with, you've probably heard me say it enough times. You're probably tired of hearing that, but this is a sports complex. That's what it is, and it's going to have traffic and it's going to have noise because that's what we need as a city, as a sports complex. It needs to meet the needs of the residents of Highland. And that's the balance. That's the hard part is, we've got 10 different organizations vying for what they believe because their kids or their family or whatever have interest in certain things. And so they want their piece in this, and we only have 17 acres to put sports on it. And to do any justice, we have to whittle that down to 3 or 4 types of things to be able to put on this this property, and then the next piece of property that we have that we put, we address some of the people that weren't impacted by this one. So from my standpoint, that's been the real issue for me, is which ones do we pick and which ones do we not pick. And the statement that one gentleman made was doing the right thing. It's a really interesting statement, because I think if we polled everybody in this audience, doing the right thing would probably be, different, because it has to do with what your personal preferences are and what you like and what you don't like. And so if I were to choose 3 things, there's going to be a percentage of residents in Highland, they're going to say I'm an idiot because I chose those 3 things, because their 2 things or 3 things didn't align. Maybe I got one of them right, but I'm an idiot because I didn't get the other 2 or something like that. So as a council, that's the hard decision, is we know we're not going to make everybody happy no matter what we put in there, but we have to make a decision. We have to move forward. So then the real issue is, what do we decide? What is it? What determines that?
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I would suggest that we amend the current master plan as suggested, using the information that we've already gathered with the open houses and with the survey. And I agree with a couple of members of the council that pickleball needs to be included, but certainly not at the level that was on the original plan. And then I would ask that it be brought back to the council, and then we could do another open house.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second it.
I'll third it.
Moved, seconded, and thirded. Ready for vote?
So it just says approve. What does this mean?
Approve the process as Tim outlined in his motion.
Approve the motion.
Okay.
Approve the motion, yeah, not approve the title. We'll amend the title appropriately. Did we, okay, we are unanimous. All right. We are on to item 6. Again, if you were here for that item, you're stuck for the rest of the evening. See how much power I have.
I do have to say, Mayor, that in the 7.5 years that I've been on the council, the last few months, we've had some very good resident participation.
Yes, we have, probably.
And you're responsible for that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll take blame or credit, whatever. Yes, so anyway, item 6, conditional use permit for Spring Creek Park. Tara?
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. So, as previously mentioned, this is for a conditional use permit for Spring Creek Park. It is a park in the Spring Creek subdivision, located at approximately 129 North, 6300 West. It is going to be in the southern portion of the park, as the outline in blue on the screen. For the background, in October 2007, Highland City purchased the property from Alpine School District. The intent was to build a park. As previously mentioned, due to budget constraints, as well as traffic and type of park and access to the park, the council decided to move away from that. On November 13th, 2018, Highland City Council decided to surplus the property with the intent of the proceeds to build Mountain Ridge Park and another portion to go to other parks. On January 22nd, 2019, Highland City Council decided to sell the property to Millhaven Development. The property was sold for $1,915,000. Millhaven Development did submit a preliminary plat. In the plat contained a 2.32 acre park. They also provided a 6-foot masonry fence. It will be but on the properties abutting the park and in the Spring Creek subdivision. The other properties to the south of the park currently do have a 6-foot vinyl fence already in place. So they are proposing a 6-foot masonry fence only for the properties that are in the Spring Creek subdivision.
So Tara, real quick before you continue. That trail that's on the northeast corner that goes north and south, is that considered part of the park as well?
It's an entrance
Between
access,
lots
right?
6 and 7, yeah, that's the entrance, so that's gonna be one entrance into the park. They're not gonna be using a masonry fence in that. They are gonna use a picketed fence along that 3-foot.
Yeah, the request by the developer was to allow the residents' ability to get to the park from the interior.
Yes.
Great idea.
Yeah, they wanted to provide more access to them so they don't have to walk all the way around. So that is gonna be one entrance into the park, and the other part entrance is gonna be from Mountain View Drive along here.
So along that same line, those who are in the subdivisions to the south of that, some of them already have access into that. My assumption is that we are going to continue to let them have access, and we ought to have some clarity on what that's going to be. But based upon what you just stated, there won't be any access from any property in the subdivision except for that one entrance, correct?
So the main entrance will be right there, whereas as you stated, they do have some fencing access along here for the other side.
And I'm talking about the residents of the subdivision that is being built. Their only access is on that trail or from the front.
Correct.
That none of them will have an entrance through their backyard.
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to, I'm glad that that's the case, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so the only entrance will be between lots 6 and 7 and Mountain View for their subdivision.
So if I was a resident south of that, I might want to put a gate in my fence.
Sure.
I believe some of them along this line already have
Yeah.
gates.
Okay.
So at least one of them does that I know of.
So this raises a question, if it's okay for them to have gates, why couldn't the people in the new subdivision have gates into the park?
They can, it'll just be difficult. They'd have to pre-plan those because it
Uh-huh.
being a masonry fence. I mean, I'm okay them having the access, but with it being a masonry fence, you would have to
Exactly.
pre-plan them.
Okay, but they could,
Yeah.
if they pre-planned.
I have a quick question about the fence on the northern boundary.
They want to tear it out.
Many people living adjacent to parks don't want a fence between them and the park. I personally like fences, they make great neighbors, but some people like it open. Why would we not want to save that money of a fence and leave that as an option for the neighbors if they want a fence to put it in? If they didn't, then it would be open.
Partly because of the issues we face tonight. We have a lot of issue with encroachment on city properties. And a fence, as you said, they make great neighbors and they delineate the property line.
Okay.
It makes it really easy to enforce, to deal with. We don't have to deal with encroachment issues and things like that.
Is this masonry fence coming as a credit? Is the city paying for it, or is the developer asking for a
We are.
credit? We are paying for it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was in the estimate.
Yeah.
There's no fence around the property. Or where else?
No.
They're expensive.
Just there.
So Catherine Schramm doesn't get a park, doesn't get a fence,
She already has one.
masonry fence.
Correct.
I think we're trying to scheme how we could get more money.
So
I mean,
also what was provided in the park concept plan was 2 pavilions, 2 swing sets, 4 park benches, 1 playground, a grass field, and walking path as well.
Now, that doesn't show the entrance.
No,
No.
we'll revise that. This is draft. We do have some comments such as swing sets because liability thing issues, but we'll work out those with during the construction drawing process.
Well, you could put other playground equipment, right?
Yes,
That's
yes.
not liable.
Yes, exactly. But swing sets themselves create an issue for us.
Have we had any input from residents, what they would like to have in the park?
Yes, we have. We actually had one open house back in, I want to say December, January.
Yeah, I was there. I didn't think we got really good definity
And
what they want.
yes.
We had asked them to get together and come back with stuff. Did they provide?
No, they never did that. We did have some show up at the planning commission meeting. Sorry, Tara, I'm jumping in. And we didn't have anything but positive comments at the planning commission meeting on it. So
How many did we have?
that spoke, probably half a dozen. Kelly was there. I don't remember.
Okay, well, we'd asked them to put together a couple people to represent their subdivision or the
Right.
neighbors around there. Kelly was one of them. I don't remember who the other, if they even told us at that time. So if Kelly was there and was giving input, I'm feeling more comfortable. I reached out to him, and apparently he's on spring break, so I didn't.
I thought there was one other time that we got comment on the park too, if I remember right.
Well, it would have had to been after that discussion we had with him, because
Yeah.
that's when we talked about it, presented it.
Right.
And they were gonna give more input.
Yeah.
We gave them some concerns and ideas and
Yeah.
issues.
I
and-
thought we talked one more, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, I'd recommend that we get a little more input from the neighbors there. And my big question is, where are the pickleball courts?
So as far as the notification we did send it to everybody within 500 feet of it, so it would be the same notice we did when we were discussing whether to sell the property or not. So,
I mean, this looks like a really nice park. Is there any other park that we mirror in the Highland, or is this one of the most decorated parks in Highland? I'm just.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Maybe Mitchell Hollow a little bit, maybe, but not with all the ornamental. One of the comments from staff was, can we reduce the beds?
Yeah, I was going to ask that very question.
The flower beds.
I was going to raise that question because
Yes.
that's a lot of maintenance.
It is, and that's one of the requests.
And particularly when you're putting gravel in it. If there's little small children, that's a lot of scraped hands and knees. I would favor more grass and less gravel.
Okay.
Particularly in this small of a park.
But then we have the issue of conservation and
water.
The water issues.
That's true. Obviously, we'll use more water, but it will also save a lot of knees and hands and a lot of maintenance. It's a lot easier to mow a piece of grass than to try to weed a flower bed.
And maybe it doesn't have to be rock. Maybe it can be some of those styrofoam kinds of filler.
Yeah, they do have rubber.
Rubber fillers, yeah.
Yeah, rubber
Yeah,
stuff.
those
Kids throw rocks.
Yes, yes, they do. So yeah, we'll take those comments and talk if.
I mean, when I was there, some residents even said they just wanted all grass. They don't want to have all the play sets or pavilions. I mean,
So this is what I know. I know that we sent a copy of this plan to the neighbors. We didn't get any. We got very little feedback. We know that
As soon as we start building it, we'll get feedback.
Yes, it's as soon as we had positive comments at the planning commission meeting, that's as far as I know how the neighbors are reacting. Usually if they're upset, they're gonna let us know.
So I would ask that you send, when we get close to a final copy, we send it to Kelly and get him to put his signature on it. Mostly, and I'm saying a little tongue in cheek, but the reality is they were looking to him, and he reluctantly agreed to represent the neighborhood. But I think that if he's not brave enough to put his signature on it, at least respond saying, yeah, I'm good with this, or we're good with it, something, then
Okay.
we're gonna get pushed back.
Sure.
And that way you're dealing with one person, not.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, he showed up at the planning commission, you said, so I'm comfortable that we're not that far off.
Yeah.
He did.
what
and
about if we just give them a
the
budget like
residents
300,000 and they come back what it is? I mean, right now, it appears we're getting it coming back to us. This is what they're asking. Instead of us saying this is a budget, they need to fit within the
Right.
budget.
So, okay, let's separate the issues here. One, this is a conditional use permit for the park. The council actually has, if the council wants to look at what the budget is for that park and how much you want to, we can spend on it. It is a $500,000 park as currently designed. Then I think that's a separate agenda item.
It says on the planning commission, one of the contingencies, though, is substantially similar to this plan, so I think that's a critical piece.
Hear me out. Yes, it is. But as the council, you're the body that approves it. So you have the ability to modify, change, whatever you want to do. So if that's a concern of the council, then, and these concerns that you mentioned, then we're more than happy to go back and fit it in along with our other things that we have to do, and get more input and and revise the budget, whatever you want us to do. It's your park.
Well, for the sake of getting it on the agenda, we're not having a public hearing on this at this point.
Correct. Although, if anybody, I have 2 minutes left on the 10 that I had before. If anybody wants to make a comment, feel free to come up and make a comment. So I'm going to start my timer.
The mayor won't let anybody boo you, so you can say anything you want.
My name is Deanne Dixon, and I'm just looking at this plan and thinking back about 12 years or whatever it was when we were looking at Mitchell Hollow plan, and there was something that bothered me then, and when I look at this plan, I think I could imagine this might bother somebody else now, and that is the trees that are next to the fence that are on the edges of the park. They grow up to be very big, and they cut out the view that people value so much who live in Highland. And I would have preferred to have fewer trees right next to the property lines of the people, and I would like to have had those trees down in the park a little bit to provide some shade for people who are playing in the heat of the summer. And so that's my thought, is to, the trees are wonderful in the beginning stages, but then they keep growing and growing, and pretty soon you can't see Mount Timpanogos anymore. So
I guess they're not like teenagers. You can't kick them out when they overgrown.
And kick them out. So less is more sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would propose that the city council accept the findings and recommend approval of the conditional use permit subject to the stipulations recommended by the Planning Commission.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Brian, did you want to amend that first?
Yeah, the number one action item by the, just a comment, Tim. The number one action item says the final plat shall be substantially conformance with the concept plan and plat received March 14th, 2019. So substantial is in the eye of the beholder. I would say we remove that from the Planning Commission and let it move forward, and we can still, I mean, as Nathan stated, we still have the ability to change it, but it puts some things around us as a city council if we approve that with that same condition. So I'd say that we only approve 2 and 3.
I would second that.
And I'll accept that. So I would.
Did we make
an
amendment to the motion?
My motion
Amending the motion.
to recommend approval of the, let's see, the conditional use permit with the Planning Commission stipulations 2 and 3.
So don't we have to vote on the amendment and then on the motion?
Well, I think he's just.
We're just putting it all in the same
I think he's
motion.
just revising his same motion.
We're being a little bit lax and informal, but that's.
Because I could propose an amendment if you wanted.
Okay, well, I just didn't understand.
I just
totally what we're
revised
doing.
my motion.
Okay, I'll second your motion then if you're putting it all in one. So that's fine.
Okay, so moved and seconded. We're ready for a vote. The stipulations 2 and 3 be included. Okay, that passes unanimously. Very good. Action item 7, adoption of Highland City Municipal Code short-term rentals. Tim?
Thank you,
have
Mayor.
the ball.
So the mayor and I have been discussing this matter since last year. We thought it would be a nice break for the council to have something to discuss other than open space and parks.
But
Actually,
no
I
less
would disagree.
controversial.
Let's not, okay? Let's not and say we did.
So, understanding a little bit about the disposition of the council in crafting this ordinance, we were mindful. You can have on one end of the spectrum no regulation, no ordinance, if the council chose to go that route with short-term rentals. On the other end of the spectrum, you could have a very regulatory-heavy, stringent ordinance. And so what's before you is on the much lighter side. Really, we're not restricting short-term rentals anywhere. They'd be allowed throughout the city. We're not zoning them. We're simply requiring that if you're going to do it, you would have to have a license. That would facilitate us to troubleshoot problems. So really with short-term rentals, you find the populace separating into two camps largely. Those that use them and that put their homes up for Airbnb, and then those that live next to those that use them, and the neighbors. And so the city staff is getting calls weekly, either from those interested in doing an Airbnb and saying, what does the city need us to do? And then those neighbors that have complaints largely about parking, noise, and then security concerns. So what the ordinance has done, it's a pretty simple ordinance where you have to be a good neighbor, you have to have a license, and you cannot rent your home to more than 12 individuals. So it does put a cap on the number of people. So you couldn't, for example, have like 40 people renting your home for a week. And then state law also permits us to enact a transient room tax, which is 1%. It would apply to short-term rental, Airbnbs, as well as motels and hotels.
Tim, is that transient room tax, is that the maximum allowed?
That's the maximum allowed.
Okay.
The state law does permit 1.5% in certain situations, but we don't qualify.
Okay, but that would be the norm then, is 1%.
Right.
And what about managing this process? Who's going to manage it?
Right now, that'd be through business licensing, so that would be Stephanie, through our treasurer.
And how many requests do we get?
We get them weekly.
So that could increase her workload fairly substantially.
Yeah, they don't take that long, so I'm not
So the
totally
value in having the license is
not stressed.
is that we then have contact information. So if there is issues, we know who the owners are. That's the value.
Well, we know who the owners are anyway.
But we have current contact information on them.
We can send them a letter.
Could do that.
My question is do you have an estimate about how many homes have these going on right now in the city?
We don't have any means to gather that data because we don't regulate it. It's happening, but we have no idea how much other than the number of complaints we might get. And I don't have a number of complaints. I just heard that Stephanie said she gets inquiries weekally.
Okay, the easiest way is to go out to Airbnb. You can pull them up
So
real
I did.
fast.
There's 3 to 4 in Highland as of last night. So Scott, when I looked, there were 3 to 4 units.
And I believe one of them's in my neighborhood, if I remember.
Yes.
It's your house.
On 90, no. Actually, we've got relatives here from California, so it's the same. But yeah, we have someone in our neighborhood, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about that. This is a family that moved to Idaho to get their son out of Lone Peak because of all the drug issues. Okay. And this was a good kid that I worked with when I was in the bishopric and that. So it's kind of a heartbreaking story. But they rented their house for a few months, and then the renters left suddenly. So they're doing this. They want to keep their home. They want to come back. They've been doing this for some time. I haven't seen any problems except one thing, is when the people leave in the middle of the week, they clean up all their garbage and fill the garbage can, and the garbage can sits on the street for days before it's picked up. And right now, it could fall out everywhere. I mean, it's as stacked as high as it could be. So I'm kind of thinking we need to look at the garbage issue a little bit and see how to deal with that, because maybe they need 2 cans and not 1 can. And if we had a big wind, this garbage would be all over our neighborhood. And so I just think we need to kind of look at that a little bit, because that's one of the big issues, not the parking as much as the garbage that's produced.
So Scott, another thing that's unique, you live in an HOA. And
This is somebody that doesn't live in the HOA.
Okay, because if it's an HOA or things, they might have regulations where they cannot.
We would
rent
not
or do
allow
Airbnb.
this in the HOA.
Well, currently the way the ordinance is written, it says that the property must be kept clean, free of accumulated garbage, and trash cans shall not be left on the curb for any period in excess of 24 hours.
See, and that's a problem, so we need to make sure that's covered, because I don't know who's going to enforce that.
Well, it would be
Be the neighbors
If we
calling.
approve that,
Code
yeah.
compliance, we would get a
So that's the
complaint.
problem, is the enforcement.
Yeah.
Because who's going to go out there and make sure that they clean that garbage up?
You have neighbors complain, that's the only way.
I mean, I'm not going to
No,
complain
no,
about
no,
it,
I know
but,
the
you know,
neighbors
it's-
complain,
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But who goes out there? Are we going to call Republic and have them come out and pick up that can? What are we going to do?
Call the
And
owner.
we would do that, we could do that
So-
anyway.
So currently what the ordinance says we do is we get a complaint and we have a contact information for the landlord. So we call them and we say, the trash has been out for too long, you've got to fix it. And if they don't, then it goes into a code compliance issue where we
We
could.
put them in jail.
we-
Well, but you could have a neighbor that could keep the garbage can up, you know, and then bring it out for them.
Right.
I mean, there's lots of options, but I just think the garbage is the only concern I really have.
And I
Yeah.
would note, I had a really good discussion with Council Member Irwin before, because this short-term rental ordinance is entirely legal, but it's a public policy issue. So having drafted the ordinance, I don't have any feelings about it other than to address an issue that is becoming more common, I think, as Airbnb is used more. But it's really for the council to decide tonight, is this good for Highland? And if you think it is, then I think this is a great ordinance to address the concerns of the residents.
I think that the issue that you raised, Scott, though, is these folks rent their place out for longer than 30 days.
No, they do it overnight they had
You said
rented, yeah.
they were renting it out for a year, but they left, and so
And they
now
left, and so now they're doing Airbnb because they need to have some income coming in. They don't want to lose their house.
I got you.
So I support them on that. I just think we just need to kind of work with them on the garbage. Maybe a neighbor, maybe I could do it, I don't care, but, you know, somebody
We'll
just
send
needs
you
to
out.
work on the garbage, yeah.
So let me ask you a couple questions of how you came up with some of this. I mean, one of them says, short-term rental property shall not exceed the lesser of 2 adults or 12 people, 2 adults and 2 children, or 12 people. How do you get the lesser of those two? Shouldn't it be the greater of the two?
Well, let's think through that. So if
Because the
I had-
lesser
if
would
I-
be the
if I
smallest
had-
number.
If I had 10 bedrooms, and you can have 4 occupants per bedroom, that would be 40 people. And so we're saying you can't have more than 12, so it has to be the lesser.
Okay, so the minimum isn't 2 adults and 2 children, it is 2 adults, 2 children per room.
Correct.
Okay.
But it does state they can't rent for one night. They have to rent for at
That's-
least 2 nights.
So that's the second thing, is why would we say they can't do, you have to do 3 or more nights, is what it says. You can't do 2 or less. So what's the
Them too. So
rationale?
It would be for, well,
Maybe I can provide some insight.
for less than 2, so it would be only 1 night. This only prohibits single night rentals.
So here's my wife has a cousin that rents.
You're gonna explain why
explain why.
one night is not,
Yes, because
Okay.
I wouldn't know, except that my wife has a cousin that has a cabin up in Morgan, and they rent it. And we're looking at something similar, and she called her cousin and said, okay, what issues did you have so we don't have to make those same mistakes? And she said one of the things that she would never do is one-night rentals. And she said the reason is because with one-night rentals, you tend to have people that rent it for a big party. And when they went and that was a problem for them because they had parties and then they would leave the next day
With a big mess.
with a big mess. And so when they went to 2 nights, it took care of that, largely took care of that issue. So I don't know why Tim put it in there, but I know
yeah. For me, if they lose their ability to do it completely by having somebody that's causing problems, I think they'll scope them out a little bit better. I wouldn't put that restriction on. I think the owner of the property should, if they want to do that, because they're the ones that would take the risk.
Yeah, but now the question is, and this is for you to decide, but this is part of balancing between the property owner and the neighbors. So if we
So
we
I'd
mitigate
have to
something-
do disclosure. I've been a person that does Airbnb for 1 night. Then I have to do a disclosure. I've also rented my property, not here in Highland, on VRBO and HomeAway. You know, so with that, when I travel, there's an area, I get down to Blanding, and the hotels have not been conducive for me, so I have found a nice Airbnb, and I stay one night. And to be honest, I keep telling my wife, I says, you ought to come down here. I have found this neat little small home that I rent one, and I go down twice a year and stay in this little Airbnb down in Blanding, and I love it, but it's a one-night stay. So I get nervous about doing the one night.
So
I heard a one-night stand.
For me, as we discuss all of these ins and outs of this particular ordinance, it just seems to me like we're creating something that will have unintended consequences. And I just think we ought to stay out of it and address the garbage issue on an individual basis, or the noise issue, because we have noise ordinances. Why do we have to go through a process of asking homeowners to ask the city for permission to rent out their own home? I just am not a.
Are we trying to get to revenue? Is that one of the reasons, is so we can enact that 1% tax? I mean, is that kind of the thought process?
But we're not talking about a lot of money here, so I, and I would be opposed to that as well. So,
and I doubt this is going to be a large moneymaker for the city. I doubt it will even offset the costs of administrating it. But
exactly.
But it's in terms of the process of going through and tailoring this ordinance. So we have a lot of communities in Utah that have short-term rental ordinances.
That doesn't make it right.
And it doesn't make it right, but what I looked at is what would be something more Highland appropriate, where it's a little bit less restrictive, and would address the issues that we've seen here. And so this is probably the most lenient of all the short-term
Tim,
rental
I have
ordinances you
no
will find.
criticism at all for the work you've done. I mean, you're responding to what city staff is viewing as a concern.
If you don't believe that the revenue off of this is going to even cover the costs, and we don't have any issues right now. By the way, I have 3 homes in my neighborhood.
More full disclosure?
Oh, no. This is, if they choose to do it. But I know of 3, and I know of at least 20 inside of Highland that I've seen. In fact, that really nice home that if you drive up toward the 4800 before you turn, there's a white house. There's 2 nice big homes, the white one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Airbnb. Just so you can see, they're all over the place. I don't have any problem not having this in here as long as it's not an issue. When it starts to become an issue, I think we need to address it. And if we can't address it with our own internal codes, then we need to put something else in there. I haven't seen any issues with my neighbors and their properties. They've done a really good job. Nobody even knew about it. Let me rephrase that. Most of their neighbors didn't know about it until they were out looking for places to rent because they had friends coming and their neighbor was renting part of their home. So I don't see a value of this right now for our city, but I believe that it can become an issue for us, and it could possibly even be a revenue maker depending on how the city turns out. I don't think that's what Highland residents do, and so I don't think it'll ever amount to enough to justify itself as a revenue maker in the future. But for right now, I'd say don't.
It seems like we're lumping agenda items 7 and 8 together, which I think is fine. The question I had about 8 and on the revenue, I think it was Ronald Reagan one time that said the government, if it moves, tends to tax it. and we certainly need more revenue in the city, but I tend to agree with both Tim and Brian that I don't know if we need a proactive ordinance right now, because we're not, I mean, my neighbor has some garbage and he's been 3 days early, but that's about the only problem I've seen, and none of the rest of the neighbors seem to have any problem. So I would kind of hold off on this as well. I agree with both of you.
So if we don't do 7, 8 is dead.
Is dead.
I don't think we have any motels in Highland, do we?
No.
Not this week.
Not this week, so it wouldn't be necessary to do
Like
8.
never. You'll never have.
Since we won't have tournaments over at the park, we probably won't need one for a while either.
So I would move that we postpone this ordinance discussion indefinitely.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Just one quick question, just for clarification. The people who are doing it, are they violating any city ordinance that we need to be concerned about?
Well, sometimes they might be with noise or with,
But
you know.
not the rental itself.
Right.
Okay.
Not the rental itself, but you'd have noise or parking. Parking is one of the big
I
ones.
just don't want to leave them out hanging if there's an issue that we're not
Good
addressing.
thought, good thought.
Okay. So it's
Thank
been
you.
moved, second.
By the way, thank you from a staff standpoint for bringing it forward. I think it's the right kind of thing for us to have a discussion on. I think that's very appropriate. I'm glad that you put something together. You guys talked about it, had some ideas. I think that's exactly the kind of thing. So
Totally agree.
don't assume that because this was turned down, it was something that you shouldn't do. This is
Yeah,
perfect.
and it's very well written. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, so move seconded, all in favor of not. It's,
Well, let's see, this is an alternative motion.
is to, yes.
It's alternative meaning to do
Postpone
what Tim said,
indefinitely.
postpone indefinitely.
So yes means
Yes
indefinite
means no.
postponement.
Okay, unanimous. Okay. Item 9, staff and council discussion and communication items. Our first contributor to that is going to be Cindy and elections.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have been studying this issue for the past few weeks, kind of stressing out about it, but I gathered a lot of information that I hope will become valuable to you as you make this decision. Highland basically has 3 options this year on how to run our elections, and you can do a precinct election, as we've done in the past. You could do a vote-by-mail election and have the city run that, or you could do a vote-by-mail election with the county, contracting with the county. So the first slide I have just shows you voter information. This was a request from a few council members, I believe the mayor and Kurt. And I don't know if you need me to read it, but one thing I would like to point out here is that 2011, 2013, and 2015 were precinct elections. 2017 was a vote by mail run by the county. You can look at the turnout percentages, and it's just interesting to note that when a council election is going on, we have less of a turnout. Kind of sad, really. And then on a mayoral and council seat election, we have a higher percentage of turnout. Again, this is a small percentage of our community, but we're grateful for those
that
that
this
vote.
really shows that you can only compare 2013 and 2017, really, since those were similar kinds.
Right, that was my purpose in showing these as well. Thank you, Brian. It is interesting to note there was a higher turnout for the vote by mail option. You can surmise why. But a lot of people may say it was due to vote by mail. Some people may say it was due to what was on the ballot, right? So you just make that decision.
Yeah, we need,
yourself.
in 2017, I think there was a congressional candidate that also was up for,
Yes.
at that time, so there was a little bit going on the statewide.
Which is why we were forced to do vote by mail.
Right.
And that always makes the percentage higher, so
Right.
it makes it hard to determine.
It is. So then I went to option 1 for precinct election, and I just outlined what the city requirements would be. We would be responsible for the ballot layout, the design, the printing. We would be responsible for the absentee ballot layout, design, printing, the postage and processing of those ballots as well. An early voting location would be required. We would prepare 4 6-hour days for that early voting. That's a minimum requirement.
Would that be 4 days just prior to the election day, or can you select any of the 4 days, or?
14 days before is when it can start.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, during that
So
time frame.
14 days before, between the election day and 14 days prior to, you would pick 4 days within that
In
point.
that time frame, right.
Seems awfully confusing for voters.
We would definitely need to advertise and educate the voters on that early election option. It's a
Yeah.
requirement
That
by
is a
code.
statutory
Something we have
requirement,
to
right?
do, the state requires it, but.
Right.
The state
Seems-
requires a minimum of 4. We could do
minimum.
more.
You're right.
You're just proposing 4.
Yep.
So we could do a full week before and just say,
It just raises the cost, that's all.
yeah, exactly.
Have you built into the budget any advertising and publications?
These costs that I'm giving to you are hard costs only. They're for printing. So I got an estimate from Car Printing for this these cost estimates I put together. And for the poll worker pay, it doesn't include soft costs, as you can see at the bottom, for employee time, travel to the county for signature verification, and the time for the city recorder and other staff. I was told by the county today, I have 2 representatives from the county here actually, if you need questions answered that I can answer, and I was really grateful for that as I was gathering this information. They said that my estimate for 2 weeks worth of time is very, very low. But
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we wouldn't build into the overall cost. Some of those are soft versus hard dollars, but it would be helpful to have comparing apples and apples, because your time is worth
it definitely would.
considering.
This was something very difficult for me because I haven't experienced it here in Highland or at my previous job. So it was just an estimate, the best estimate that I could do, and I tried to be very, very fair.
The reason for 2 voting locations would be to keep the lines down, I suppose?
We have done 2 voting locations in the past. We have also done more. We have done up to 5 voting locations in the
Yeah, in
past.
2010 and 12, there were 5.
The council, or the county has
Or 9
suggested
and
that we
11.
do 800 registered voters, that we can process 800 registered voters per location on that day. And so I can get to those costs later, or those amounts later. Oh no, it's right here. They suggested that we can do 800 per day per location. We believe with the last election information that we have, that we processed 1,600 total voters, and with including the amount of permanent absentee voters, which currently is 2612 or 2616, that a portion of those voters could come, oh no, Erin, help me remember. They could come to vote that day, but it would probably only be about 500. And so we were still assuming that we could still cover that, the amount of
I'm
voters
just
that are gonna come
wondering if
in
1
2
location
locations.
would be fine, because the distance between the community center and here is so close.
It is close. Those are the 2 locations that we currently could use that are the best scenarios for us. In the past, when they had 4 locations or 5, they were I keep saying that they, because I haven't experienced it here yet, but it's I get to do this. So we were considering schools, or had voting in schools, and they have been a strong, the county and the Lieutenant Governor's office has asked us not to include voting in schools due to security issues. And they have also asked us, it's just strongly suggested that we don't have voting in churches just due to church and state issues. So our 2 locations that we have here in Highland is the City Hall and then the Community Center. If you have other suggestions, we would be glad to look at those.
Okay, Cindy,
Yes.
what security issues do you have if you vote in a school? I don't understand that.
Okay, so the way it was described to me, Scott, is that when you go to vote there, the school has no ability or a difficult ability to see who's in and out of their school all day long. They were losing track of children. Parents were coming and picking them up and taking them home, or friends' parents were coming and taking them home. And they realized, oh my goodness, this is a real issue that could happen where they don't have the same kind of control over their security measures there in the school. That's how it was described to me. That's the information I gathered.
Yeah, the problem I have with just having a central location are there people that live on the outlying neighborhoods of the city. And I would drive 10 miles to vote. But there's a lot of people, if you've got little kids at home or you've got one other thing, it's a major ordeal to vote and find somebody to attend and stuff. And so a lot of those people tend not to vote. And I've had people tell me, we were voting when we went to Freedom Elementary, or we were voting when we went to, Timberline, not Timberline, but Cedar Ridge, I can't remember the name of it out there. Ridgeline, yeah.
Okay.
But you have people drive from Sky Ridge down the city center. I think when you make it more inconvenient to vote, less people vote. Now, maybe that, isolates the people that really care, but at the same time, I just wonder if we need to make it inconvenient. It doesn't seem like a good thing.
That was one
Yeah.
of the information, some of the information that I gathered, that was one of the pros of vote by mail, Scott. So, and especially where the city, we have 2 locations, and the county is highly encouraging me to have at least an additional location. That could be a pro for vote by mail. I just wanted to go on, is it okay?
Sure.
Okay, so then the poll worker recruitment and training,
Actually,
yes.
before you go on, do the county representatives have any cost estimates on what precinct voting costs per voter? Do you track any of that kind of information? Yeah, precinct voting that we're talking about.
Roseanne.
I'm Roseanne Mitchell, and I'm the elections director for about the past 6 weeks here in Utah County. But I come to Utah County with over 20 years of election experience. So I'm very familiar with how to do a traditional election with regular polling places as well as vote by mail.
We pulled her from Salt Lake County, and I've worked with her in the past. I'm very impressed with her knowledge. Just a little plug for you.
So, first of all, I want to just go back to the 800 number, and that comes from my experience at Salt Lake County. And as we did traditional polling places, we would always say that one table of poll workers could process 800 voters in one day in the old-fashioned way, using a paper register, which is actually much slower than using the poll pads like we have now in Utah County. So that is, I know that is a good, firm, solid number. And
So if you had multiple tables here, then it would be 800 per table?
yes, but can your parking lot accommodate that many cars? So that's always one thing too to take into consideration is the parking that goes along with that. And that's why if you split that up between a couple of different locations and make the parking more accessible to people, it would really help. The other thing that I would recommend is, I would say if you had to choose between putting a polling location in a school or a church, go to a church. Hands down. I have very strong feelings about voting in schools anymore. I don't have children in public school, but I have grandchildren in public school. And I'm sorry, but I would probably choose to keep my child home from school that day. And I think we do a huge disservice to our children in the schools by asking them to open the doors. I think it's a huge public safety risk. And I don't think we should do that. Churches actually are an awesome location. You do in a community like we have in Utah. Some people get a little concerned about it being in a church. But again, I go back to the parking issue. You have phenomenal parking at churches. And so that's a great location because they have great parking, great accessibility, and it's quiet. Schools aren't that quiet. So I have some other comments, but if Cindy, if you want to go on first, if you've got more, then I'll share my comments in a minute.
Can I ask a question again, or just express opinion? So, I can understand the argument for one central location, but one of the problems is then you have long lines as well, besides parking issues. And I think there was a big issue in Pleasant Grove with the last national kind of election or state election, where people went in to vote the last minute and had to stand in line for hours, and there was a big article in the Deseret News, and in fact, I know the person that complained, but they wanted to vote, didn't mail in their ballot, waited for hours to do that. I think we just have to make voting reasonably convenient, even though it's a duty. But, I have one of my kids that helped me put up posters, and then she didn't vote. It's kind of like, okay, but I just think we need to make it as convenient as possible for people to vote.
And I agree, but I would definitely advise, if you want a location someplace else, if you chose to go with regular polling places, I would definitely recommend that you choose to look towards a church instead of a school. In Salt Lake County, we used churches because you get into some places and there just isn't anything else. We had actually 9 denominations of churches that we used. We did use the Jewish synagogue until we got kicked out because the poll workers took ham sandwiches for lunch. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your help.
That's interesting.
Okay, let me get back here. So with option 1 as a precinct election, we would do the recruiting for the poll workers, their training and their food for that day. In looking through my files and information and asking other cities and talking to the county, we are suggesting 18 poll workers. That would be 9 per location, and then 5 counters and 2 judges would be here at this location in this proposal. There would also be costs for newspaper ads, noticing requirements, flyers, and education of the public. There would be extra costs for supplies and extra staff hours, which is not included in this estimate. But the estimate does include hard costs of printing, and that was an estimate, a quote provided by Car Printing, and then the poll worker costs, which was provided by the county, and that's $10,215. This is per election, so if you have a primary election, you would double this. Okay, and then the next is, I was asked about the counting process, and I have been reading a lot about this because this is the portion that I have not experienced before, is the counting portion. This is outlined in the code, Utah Code 20A4101, 20A4102, and other areas of that code as well. But basically, it was that on election day, after at least 20 votes have been cast, the receiving judges deliver the ballot boxes to the counting judges, and then they prepare another box to receive ballots, and then the judges count. And there's a process for them to do that. They separate the provisional ballots in a different place and count the regular ballots, and the process continues until the polls close. And then once the polls close, the election judges count the number of ballots cast. They compare it to a poll book. The provisional ballots are sealed in a different envelope and delivered to an election officer. They're separated by party. Each vote is evaluated based on code 20A4105. And then once they're okay, they're recorded on a tally sheet, provided to the election judge to certify their accuracy and completeness, and then delivered along with an official register to the election officer. These records are maintained for 22 months after the election. Let's see, what else do I have on this slide? Oh, and then during this process, the city used to have access to Vista. So city recorders had been able to go to Vista and verify signatures on absentee voting. I had mentioned before we have 16 permanent absentee voters right now. So when those ballots are coming in, I would gather those and take those to the county for verification. And that is required to have 2 employees go to the county when doing that, just for, that I'm not.
Did you say 26?
2,616. Okay. And so we would create a plan, and I would take, we'd go 2 by 2 so that I'm not altering the vote or putting in my own votes in those votes, whatever you could do, I don't know. But we wanted to do 2 by 2, and so that just causes staff time and my absence from the city as well as that employee. And then the unofficial results can be reported the night of the election, and then results can be separated by precinct. We can do that. I'm very nervous about that, but we can. I've heard that's very difficult, but I will figure it out. Option 2 is vote by mail and the city running the election. So we thought we'd gather some costs for that. The similar requirements are here. We'd create the ballot, printing, mailing. This time we would include postage and processing of those ballots. No early voting would be required with this option. You would have 1 voting location on election day. That's all that's required. And then we would be in charge of poll worker recruitment, training, and food. This time we're looking through information and gathering information. We feel good about having 7 poll workers here with 5 counters and 2 judges. And then again, there's the education, the newspaper ads, noticing requirements, and other expenses of staff time. The estimated costs I'm sharing with you is $16,387. This is with a permit that we would need to apply for that would allow us to send out the ballots at 0.14 cents per ballot. But if we provided return postage, as the county is doing with their option, so we wanted to kind of give you an apples to apples, that postage would be included in this estimate. The estimated cost of $14,804 would not include returned postage, the city paying for that return postage. Okay, I have a lot of pros for this. I don't know if you want to hear all of them, but it's easy and convenient. Highland has a lack of good polling locations, and so with our 10 precincts, they have to be combined to vote at the 2 polling locations. This option of vote by mail could increase the voter turnout. There was a lot of data on this that I read and reviewed. Again, that's up for debate. That you can avoid longer lines because a lot of people tend to vote prior. There still is going to be people coming and voting on election day. I think that will not go away as long as we offer that. And then early voting can be eliminated with this option, and then there's less confusion. One thing I wanted to point out with this is that in the last 3 elections, our residents have voted vote by mail. And so if we change now, that could just be confusing for them, where they were used to voting at a certain location and now they're going to be voting somewhere different perhaps. Also, if you would please keep in mind, there is an initiative right now to change the form of government through the county, which would require a vote by mail for the general election. And so if we chose vote by mail, this option, that would be less confusing than holding a precinct election for the primary and then doing a vote by mail for the general in the same year. And all future county elections will be vote by mail, is what I'm being told and what I've gathered. And so that would create less confusion if we did vote by mail. And then legislation has been being pushed to require vote by mail elections. And I already talked about that. And then all of our surrounding cities will be doing vote by mail. And so it may add to confusion where they're talking to their neighbor and their neighbor's getting a ballot and then they're not getting a ballot and they're wondering why, and then they call me. And then the next slide is the counting process, which is very similar to...
Now your cell phone number is going to be on all the ballots, right?
No. Unless you buy me a new cell phone with a new number.
Pretty cheap cost.
This counting process is similar. The difference, I think, to point out here is that the verifying of the signatures will be on all ballots. So all mail-in ballots, all dropped-off ballots, all absentee, overstay, and provisional, that I would have to, with another employee, take to the county to verify those signatures.
Does the county charge us for that?
Say no. The answer is no. The right answer is no.
That process is going to be
So
interesting.
those costs aren't reflected in here.
The costs are not reflected in this, is what I'm hearing from them. And I did not include those costs, no. It was hard to determine.
Or the other one where we needed their help as well.
Right. And so unofficial election results can be reported the night of the election, and we will be able to separate by precinct. I think the vote by mail might be a little easier to do so, because you'd put a label on the envelope telling what precinct they were in. Anyway, it would just be a little bit easier from what I've gathered information-wise. Option 3 is vote by mail and contracting with the county. The county then would provide all the things that we've previously talked about, the ballot layout, the design, the printing, the mailing, the postage, and return postage, and also the processing of those ballots. They have new scanning equipment that they talked about at a training that I went to. It sounds phenomenal and awesome. No early voting would be required. We also have great staff at the county. I have confidence in them. City recorders around me feel very confident with the new administration and the new cooperation that they've had with the city recorders in our county. Poll worker, they would be responsible for the poll worker recruitment and training. I don't know if they're providing food, so I didn't include that. And then one voting location on election day, much like the option if the city was doing it. They would tabulate and report election results on the countywide website, and it's done by machine. Do you, Roseanne, you can tell me this, but I went to a kind of a field trip at Salt Lake County and watched the process of how they count ballots, and I gotta tell you, I was really impressed. It made me feel like I don't know how you could ever have voter fraud, because the machine would scan that ballot, it would verify the signature and compare it to the database that they have. And then at that point, if there were any issues with however the programming is made into that machine, then it kicks it to a person, and then a person researches that. And then those election results can be instant instead of waiting for counters and judges and all that process to go through.
So
I was very
one
impressed
question,
with it.
Cindy, our county in the last 2 elections, it's been a long time before we got results.
Oh, okay.
For me, it was frustrating. I don't know about anybody else, but I was
Well, you were
particularly
running.
frustrated. I was running, but the time before that, it was the same
Wasn't
thing.
frustrating for me at all.
No.
Maybe I'm misspeaking.
But I found it frustrating, and do we have any anticipation that it will be better or worse?
Oh.
It won't be worse?
It will not be worse.
Okay.
It should be better. You should see a definite improvement because of some of the new equipment that we're implementing this year.
So I was in technology for 35 years, and I learned to not be the guinea pig on first. So if this is new equipment that for us, but not other people. But even then, when you have new equipment, if it's been used somewhere else, it hasn't been used where you're at, and there are always process issues that come up, right? So I would rather let other people be a bit of guinea pig. That's my model.
It's been used in most of the other counties in the state of Utah, and it is the largest election system vendor in the country.
Okay,
So the
employees-
Russians have already broken into it then? The Russians have already broken into it then? Is that what I'm hearing? Oh.
Have our employees worked with it before?
Soros funded it.
Have our employees worked with it before? Yes. I'm just calling me nervous Nelly, but I hate being the guinea pig.
Okay.
But I don't have a vote, so it really doesn't matter, does it?
Okay, and so then the provisional ballots, all the ballots would be verified at the county with county staff. Ballots could be dropped off at various locations. I don't know is that correct? Right. And then the estimated cost for this option is $18,580. This is $1.80 per active voter.
So there are no soft costs hidden here, right? So you're taking everything.
Right.
And so the other thing that wasn't in the other estimates were soft costs, as well
Right.
as if you would charge us to validate ballots.
In fact, that's true, Mayor. In fact, they have said to me this is a cost not to exceed. So they will not exceed this cost even if they incur additional cost.
And
I
this
do
would
want to
be-
say,
This would be per election, so if we had a primary, it would be double.
This is per election. You're right.
so you talked about soft costs with Cindy's time. Cindy is going to be working on the election no matter what type we do. So her cost and time would be much decreased with this type, but she still, will work with candidates and do everything that way.
Yes,
Right,
but she
that's
doesn't
true.
have to go to the county.
Not to verify the signatures or anything like that.
Okay.
That's right. A couple of points to make on this option that I had gathered in my research is that several cities had made the comment. I asked them, why are you going with vote by mail in the county? It seemed like, a bigger cost. So I asked them why. Their council had chose that. And hands down, all of them said voter turnout was their major one. But a few cities actually said to me, the council wanted greater impartiality. So when it came to processing the votes, especially in a municipal election. So that was one point that I gathered that was a pro for this. An additional pro. I think there's a lot of pros for me personally in this option, but and for people who find it difficult to get to the polls, all that is a great option with vote by mail. And then improvements on signature verification, where they interface not only with voter registration, but the DMV updates for addresses and such. So those were some of the pros that I had gathered in my research.
Impartiality.
Oh.
I'm curious to know
Impartiality.
why they would say that.
At first, that sort of offended me a little bit because I would be the one that would be involved in that process of counting the votes and
Exactly.
and training the poll workers. But I quickly could let that go because then it's not on me if there's mistakes made. It's on the county. Sorry, you guys, but yeah. And so I just thought, and also there were some council members, I guess, who were concerned with the public view on the city representatives or city staff altering or making changes to the counts because the city recorder is the one who verifies those results. Those were the comments that were made to me, so I'm sharing those with you. The counting process would be basically through the county. The county would allow mailed ballots to be dropped off at the city or at other locations. They would be picked up by county representatives and taken to the county instead of myself and staff doing that. Ballots will be scanned by a machine, as I talked about previously, and signatures would be verified there at the county. And votes would be tallied on election day, and unofficial election results will be reported the night of the election. So that's all very similar.
So you would bring the orange boxes here like you did the last election? And
We have an option too to place a permanent ballot drop box if you'd like to at the city. They have obtained funds or something to help us with that cost as well, if you want to have this be a permanent ballot drop box location.
What does that
Is that
look
right,
like?
Roseanne? Okay.
So we have quite a bit of grant money available to us. Some of it is designated specifically for the voting equipment, and that is why we're moving to a new vote system. We had nearly $750,000 at our disposal to use towards this new equipment. It's amazing equipment. I've been through when I started in elections, I started with punch cards, so I've kind of seen this process through, and this new system is amazing. It's really a great system. It has been used by most of the jurisdictions, the other counties in the state of Utah already. We have support from them as well as from the vendor themselves. Ballot drop boxes are a great convenience for our voters. They remind me kind of a library book drop in a way, and they would be bolted in, they're cemented into the ground, and they do have a lock on them that would be, so they would be closed off when it's not election season. And it just allows voters the option to turn in and drop off their voted ballot at their convenience. And so they would be able to drop those curbside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week during that voting period, which is really a nice convenience for them to have an option to drop that curbside.
And that, in your mind, do you envision that by our post box in the library drop box or out front?
That's a great location, somewhere where people can drive by easily. Mm-hmm.
Put it right next to the Arctic Circle drive-through. Drive a little business through the city.
Well, she mentioned she
Get
had
an
some
ice cream
funds.
cone
You
while
might
you're-
need to have, maybe some public safety there. We could contract out. We have some police and ambulance that maybe we have to have an ambulance while people are coming in. We could contract that with the county. If you have some funds, we do contract services, just so you're kind of aware.
Oh my. It's even cool, like it has a fire suppressant in it and everything. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things was when I was in Salt Lake County working, and one time they said, when we remodeled our ballot center and we knew we were doing a lot more vote by mail, and they said, well, we can't put in a fire suppression system because we can't have water damaging all of these ballots. And I said, no, wait a minute. So you're telling me we'll let them burn up instead of getting wet? Because I can remake a wet ballot so that it can be tabulated, because usually I can read it. And, we know what the voter's intent was. But if it burns up, I can't do anything. And we went, oh yeah, I guess we do need fire suppressant. So then the same issue came up with ballot drop boxes. And we had asked around because they're used quite extensively in Colorado and Washington and Oregon and California. And we said, what do? Aren't you worried that somebody might drop something in there and light your ballots on fire? And we found that in Utah, we're notorious for this what if game, and most other people don't worry too much about it, but the state of Washington did, and that they put these little fire retardant things in these ballot drop boxes, so if somebody did try to drop something in there, it would stop the fire. So in Salt Lake County, we did purchase those and implement those as well at our drop boxes. Never has been a problem, but it is one of those things that helps me sleep just a little bit better at night. So can I just take a couple of minutes, and I want to touch on a couple of things. We're working really hard in Utah County to make sure that people are confident in the elections process. They may not have been so much in the past. We have a new county clerk, and her chief deputy clerk are just absolutely phenomenal. They're fireballs. Sometimes it's really hard to keep up with them, but it's really fun to be a part of this exciting new team. We're taking advantage, like I said, of that $750,000 to implement new voting equipment. There's some other grant money to help with election security, and we are using some of that money to help purchase the drop boxes that would be available for the voters throughout Utah County. And then there's some other security things that will help to enhance the election process.
Do you know where the grant money is coming from?
So the equipment, the money for the voting equipment was allocated in the 18 legislative session.
So it's a state grant?
That is state grant money. The other grant money is federal grant money that was allocated to the states. There was a certain amount allocated to all of the states. The Lieutenant Governor's office is using a portion of that for some election security things on their end, and then they made some funds available to all of the counties based on their voter registration population. And so we're using that money to help us with some of the other things that we can use to better to improve the process for the voters in Utah County. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that Utah County Elections Office has 4 new staff people. We have doubled our staff in that office from what it was last year. And with that, we've more than doubled the years of experience that our elections staff has. We previously did not have an elections director in Utah County. I come to Utah County with 20 plus years of election experience. Started in 1998 at the in the governor's office under Olene Walker when she was the lieutenant governor. I was a temporary employee helping out a friend, and this is where I ended up now. So it kind of draws you in. One of our greatest concerns is voter confusion, and we want to make sure that the voters in Utah County see that elections are going to be handled the same, and that's why we would encourage you to look towards Vote by Mail, whether you do the election or we do it, and we would love to do your election, but we just feel like the last 4 times that your voters have voted, they voted by mail. We know that next year there will be 3 elections, one in March, one in June, and one in November, and those will all be vote by mail elections. So to keep that consistent for the voters in Highland City and Utah County, we would encourage you to have your voters vote by mail. I just worry that does Highland City have the resources and the time to meet the needs of the voters in this situation? Answering the phone calls and the emails, and we unless you're going to buy Cindy that new phone, she might be a bit inundated with those phone calls. The early voting workers, as well as the poll workers, bringing the ballots to the county and working with our staff to verify those signatures. And that's a conversation for another day, but I love talking about verifying signatures and what that process looks like. I'm very passionate about that and very proud of what we can do nowadays with that and what we do to ensure that every vote counts and that we only count them if the signature matches. The most frequent reasons why we can't count a ballot is that the signature doesn't match what we have on record, and that's usually because we like to refer to it as spouse swapping, because the husband or wife will sign both of the affidavits on the envelope, and so when we go, oh, I can't count Rod's ballot because it was signed by his wife. And we have to go back and forth and just make sure. And we make every attempt. We notify the voters. The other problem we often have is that voters forget to sign that affidavit. Those are immediately pushed out of the system, and we make phone calls and send emails to get those resolved right away so that we can move those ballots through and get those counted. And a lot of that's just voter education. I want to remind you that, like Cindy said, you have 2,616 voters that have already requested their ballot by mail. Which, that's a really great number. That's a quarter of your active voters in Highland City that are already, you have to send them their ballot because they've requested that. And that's an impressive number at a quarter of the voters. But that's going to add a layer of confusion for your voters, because if Tim gets his ballot but nobody else in his household gets their ballot by mail, then they're saying, what is wrong with them? How come they didn't send everybody a ballot? And they don't realize that you might have all gotten your ballot by mail last time, but because you're not all on permanent vote by mail, you may not get it this time. So it does cause some confusion that way. It also is a very nice convenience for families that may have college students away, and because you can forward that ballot on to your college student very easily, and they will have the opportunity to vote in this election, especially if they're your own kids. The recruiting and training poll workers, I like to think that Utah County, this is one area where we have definitely shined and excelled in the past. Lisa is our coordinator for all of that, and she does an amazing job. Ask any of your poll workers, and she's as enthusiastic and as well and as articulate as somebody can be when they're training poll workers on this process. Remember that you have same-day registration. Also, you have 24 military and overseas voters that fall under the Department of Justice requirements that those ballots be mailed out or sent to those voters 45 days before an election. And the Department of Justice is a little bit harsh on that one, and we never want to fall on their bad side. And then I wanted to just, and Cindy pointed out, what is Highland's plan if we end up with a countywide election come November? And one of the other things is election security is a national hot topic. And are you prepared to meet the questions and the concerns that will be posed by Homeland Security? We've already had a lot of interaction. The LG's office is constantly communicating and working with Homeland Security. It's kind of frightening in a way. But we at a county level have also been meeting with them and had some training from them. And in closing, I just want to end with a quote from Lyndon Johnson, and he said, public confidence in the election process is the foundation of confidence in government. And I just hope that you'll remember that as you consider the voters in Highland. And we, like you, want to do what is best for your voters. And if you have any questions, we are here to answer your questions and to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Roseanne. So I just have a couple more slides. The next slide is just very quickly, I was just explaining to you, I contacted the cities that surround us, and these are this is the choice that they're making for their election type, vote by mail and contract with the county. The two cities that will be doing a precinct election is Mona and Nephi. And then the next one is just a summary. So the summary of options is precinct election, $10,215 per election. Option 2 is vote by mail with the city, $16,387 per election. That does include return postage, that cost us. And then option 3 is vote by mail with the county, $18,580, and that is not to exceed.
Okay,
So the
discussion?
next slide is just questions and direction.
Discussion, anybody have comments?
Well, it seems to me that I've always been opposed to the vote by mail process for lots of reasons, and lots of things have been addressed that may resolve some of my concerns. But as the mayor just mentioned, I think the ship has sailed as it relates to vote by mail. I think there is an issue of confusion if we go back and forth and back and forth. There was an issue of confusion when we went from 5 voting areas to 2.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I happen to agree that the simpler we can make it, the better. Obviously, you know, if we feel confident, and I feel confident in our county clerk and deputy clerk. So, you know, I feel that they want to do the right thing. You both have presented a very good opportunity. The concern I have is the cost. And, you know, we don't know whether we'll have a primary or not. We have 3 seats available. That means 6 candidates. We could have just 6 candidates. We could have just 3 candidates. I don't know. But we could have 10 candidates. And if we have 10, it would require that we do a primary, unless we did the ranked choice voting. And I understand that the county has the software to handle that ranked choice voting, which would take a huge burden off of Cindy and her team as it relates to the vote count process. So as difficult as it is for me to say that we might have to go with the vote by mail, the only way I would go vote by mail, though, it would be if we did the ranked choice voting.
I'm very passionate about elections. Ranked choice voting, let me just tell you one more positive on that one. I really didn't make a big deal about that because I didn't think you guys were really that interested in ranked choice. There is, again, some state grant money available to us for, especially earmarked for voter outreach. And we really think we only have a couple of jurisdictions right now that are interested in ranked choice voting. So that puts a lot of money for voter education at your disposal. So if you chose to go that way.
The ranked choice voting is going to require education.
It definitely is. It definitely is. But we're talking, we have a substantial amount of money for voter education, if that's the case. Which just brings
I just love hearing that government has a great deal of money just floating out there.
Well, you know,
it's out of the deficit.
Especially as we get close to tax day.
Yeah.
Well, when you're the epicenter of dysfunction, the governor likes to make sure that that will never happen again.
What?
And that he was quoted as saying last year
Slammed Utah County.
that Utah County was the epicenter of dysfunction when it comes to elections.
Well, he lives in Utah County, so it's his fault.
I know. So we really have made some great strides to make sure that we improve that. And we would like to put that money to good use and really help you with your election. And we don't want Highland to take over that title.
So I'd like to make a comment. I would lean towards the vote by mail and having the county do it. I need to know more about ranked choice voting, though. It just seems to me it eliminates the primary, which cuts the cost, but it also seems like we could have 13 candidates out there all vying for the top positions, and I'm not sure that that's, I'd like to understand it a bit better before I voted for that, yeah.
I would share those same concerns because the nice thing, well, last time we had 11 candidates for 2 seats on the city council. And if you go to a general with 11, I don't know how you evaluate them that's a lot of people to pick from, and it's going to be way easier to say, well, I like that person, don't like what he's wearing, I don't like his haircut, like her haircut, whatever.
Going through the primary process eliminates some of that.
It does reduce that, and it provides more exposure to the
So
populace
one of the
for
things that
candidates.
it does is sometimes too, my knowledge and experience with this is somewhat limited. Josh Daniels is as expert in the state on this. But let me tell you a couple of things that I really like about ranked choice voting. And the first is this. As a voter, sometimes it's hard to pick. It's hard to say, they're all great, but I like this one, but I could like this one too, and if this one doesn't win, this would be my second choice. And so you kind of get that say. So I don't know which ones of you would be up on the ballot this year, but if it was, let's say it was
It's
Scott.
not me.
Okay, it's not Scott.
Not me either.
I'm not going to go through that.
Okay, so
Pick a random person.
hypothetically, it's Lisa and I on the ballot, and Cindy, okay? So the thing is that it makes it easy for the voters, because they go, oh, that's Cindy, she's just so stinking nice. How can I not vote for her? But Roseanne has a little bit more experience. So Roseanne would probably be my second choice if Cindy didn't win. Lisa, I could take her or leave her. So you kind of get that choice in there. But the other thing that it does is it makes for a cleaner campaign, and it makes it so candidates don't necessarily play as dirty. Because here's what I do is I go, I know you love Cindy. And Rod, I don't blame you, because Cindy is the nicest person ever. And I'm not going to ask you to give up your first place vote for Cindy, because I understand she would be my first choice too. But can I just ask that you'll vote for me as your second choice candidate? Or I say, thank you, I'm so glad I'm your first choice, but let me just tell you, if you haven't made up your mind yet, Lisa should be your number 2 choice. Because I could work really well with Lisa, and I would encourage you to choose her as well. So you're kind of helping each other campaign a little bit. And that's one of the advantages that you may love that idea, you may hate that idea, but.
Well, to every pro, there's a con, right? So the con is, I am not as strong on hard issues, I am more milquetoast. Mm-hmm. And so people don't know what I'm really gonna do, right? Mm-hmm. Because I shade, and I don't say, yes, I really believe this, and I know you don't really like it, but so rather than try and educate you on why my position is right, the easier path is just to waffle a little bit and make you think I like something. So it cuts both ways.
So, and if you want more information on this, I'm just gonna volunteer Josh to come back maybe for a work session or something, because he is definitely more articulate in explaining ranked choice voting.
The problem we have, though, is a time issue. I think that decision has to be made by the 15th, which is just prior to our next council meeting.
A quick question.
We could give you a little bit of a leeway on that if you needed it.
Could we do it next council on the 16th?
We can wait. If you're looking at that because of the date we gave for the interlocal agreement, I can be a little bit flexible on that.
A quick question.
Didn't the lieutenant governor say May 1st was, or am I wrong, Cindy? Sorry.
It's April 15th.
To decide if we are doing a vote by mail.
Oh, right, I have to let the lieutenant governor's office know by May 1st, on or before.
So, but vote by mail is a hard date on the 15th?
No,
ranked choice
voting.
Ranked choice voting is April 15th, is that correct?
Not statutory?
They extended it, it used to be.
It was
February
earlier.
1st
You
or
could
something.
tell them, if you wanted to give them the date and say, we think we're gonna go this way and we're gonna do ranked choice, you could still pull out and do a regular election, a vote by mail election. If you put that out there right up front, that you were considering it and you're contemplating it.
So I know Lehigh opted in, and then they've since opted out,
They
right?
have opted out. We do have a couple of other cities, Vineyard and Payson, that right now it looks like they're going to go vote by mail, or ranked choice voting. So you have some options. You could just go ahead and tell the Lieutenant Governor's office if you really want more information on that, and then we could discuss that later. And like Cindy told you, that 18,000 is a not to exceed, and we will do everything we can to keep it below that. That's also a rate that is in line with most of the other counties in the state of Utah. Obviously, Salt Lake County is higher because their overhead costs are much higher, but it is kind of a standard that they give out, is that same not to exceed for a jurisdiction of your size.
Not having a primary would be a big benefit, I think, for candidates, because there's a lot less money they have to spend.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So just for an item of information for the council, to do the county election, we would have to pull the money out of reserves to do it.
So I'm not in favor of ranked choice voting. Not because we've done it in the precinct here in Utah County for years, and it goes great. I don't believe that the citizens are ready for it. It is dramatically different than anything we've done. Voting by mail and voting by ballot at the precinct, or here in a precinct, is almost identical other than a few physical things. So it's 90%, 95%. Rank count voting is not.
No.
And I'm not interested in going down that path until other people have played with that and proved it out. It's not worth the problems that are going to come from that. So in my opinion, I'm not even interested in even talking about it anymore.
Okay.
I'm one of all these votes. The other piece is, I would rather go with the city doing the election and not having to pay for the return ballot. It's my frugal side to me, and I believe that we can do it cheaper than what the county. The only issue is I'm pretty sure that we're going to end up with a county vote in the final because of the change in government. That would be the only thing that would tip me in that direction, but it would still save us some money, $4,000.
Well, we don't know what they're going to charge us to verify our ballots, so that would add to the cost.
Right. And I would need to talk with Amelia. I would lean towards we wouldn't charge you, but it's not my call to make. Yes. I would definitely have to lean towards Amelia on that one to make that decision. So if you were, the other thing is to remember too, is that when you contract with the city, your voters can vote at any vote center throughout the county, which can be very convenient for the voters. They wouldn't be able to do that. But if you were considering doing your primary election by mail and having the city do it, and then, because you are keeping some consistency there come November, if we did have a county-wide question on the ballot, there would be that level of consistency for your voters. I would love to do both of your elections for you, but I understand where you're coming from as well.
Quick question, maybe an extension of what Brian was saying. How widespread is the ranked choice voting? My concern is that we're somewhat on the bleeding edge, and as Brian alluded to, voter education is critical, and so I'm just wondering how extensive or how much penetration there is in the voting pool across the state or across the United States.
Across the state, it is brand new this year, and right now we do only have a couple of cities that are interested in it, and it looks like they will be the only ones moving forward in the state of Utah. That could change in the next week or so. Nationally, on a national level, San Francisco has done this for a long time, and
definitely don't want to do it if they're doing it. That
definitely
just sealed the deal right there.
Sealed the deal.
Of all the cities.
So San Francisco, Minneapolis, New Mexico does it.
You're talking cities, not states.
Correct, cities. That some cities in New Mexico do it. There's several in New Mexico. Minneapolis has done this for many, many years, San Francisco.
I'm hearing you correctly, it's pretty limited.
Yes.
That's
it
the
is.
exception, not the rule.
Yes.
Okay.
It is gaining a little bit of momentum, but it's still very limited right now.
I lean towards option 3. I like the vote by mail, and I'd like you folks to take care of it.
Wow.
Cindy paid me to say that.
You got lots of money. That's expensive. That could cost us $36,000.
I will not include that on the record, Scott.
That could be a $36,000 bill.
On option 2B, the 14,000, where we don't pay the postage, the return postage.
I tend to favor paying for the postage just to invite more participation, but I think we also have to consider the soft dollars, because the soft dollars on 2 will be significantly more than 3, and significantly more on 1 than 2 or 3. So I think we have to consider staff overhead, and so I would lean more towards option 3 again, because of the limited demand it makes on our very limited staff. So again, I guess I'm voting for Cindy again, that would be my preference as well. And the consistency. I think the consistency is critical, even on a primary.
And that's my biggest concern, is we want to keep things consistent for the voters.
Yeah, surprises tend to upset voters and make them question the integrity of the vote.
Yes.
The problem, this argument that we're going to have a greater participation in the voting process doesn't hold any water with me, because I really don't want more voters. I want informed voters voting. And so, you make them pay an extra, 50 cents for a stamp. They're a little bit more committed. So I don't know that we have to pay for that. So I would agree with Brian on that issue. But boy, I'll tell you, I'm an old guy. It's hard for me to change. And especially when the trouble I have with, I understand the ranked choice voting, and I think it works. Where I struggle is where some of the funding is coming from, and I just wonder what I'm missing.
Those dang Russians, I'm telling you.
They're not Russians.
It's just federal deficit dollars, Tim. You know that.
Most of the money on ranked choice voting is coming from private.
What's that?
Private.
Yeah, that's right.
The people who sell the software.
Some of it comes from Soros.
So on the ranked choice voting, it intrigues me. I'm not sure I want to be the pioneer of it. I think we might want to hear a little bit more how the cities of Vineyard, and I can't remember if you said Salem or Payson, if they come through, because I do think there'll be some learning curves. I'm not sure. The one concern I do have is for the candidates. If you have a primary and then you have the runoff, you're going to have some cost. If you're saying each one of them, it does cut their cost. However, it allows the residents to kind of also maybe focus in on it. As we look at the costs and just looking that we really probably don't understand all the other costs with option 2, I would be favoring option number 3, to have the county take care of it. We know what our costs are. We know everything. And I would probably prefer to have them keep it consistent where they get the mail back, to try to get them so it's consistent. They've received it. It's what they did last time. I'm worried someone won't put the stamp on, because it's happened that last 2 times. They didn't have to put the stamp on. So I think there can be some confusion that way.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm seeing a consensus around 3 and not ranked choice voting. Is that accurate?
I think that's the way I feel.
And I think there is interest. Is there interest in getting our ballot box permanent?
Not for me. I mean, it's a twice a year kind of thing.
How much do those ballot boxes cost?
Well, if you do it this year, we have funds that we will cover the cost.
You're gonna maintain it every year too?
Yep, we sure are.
As long as we go option 3 every year? Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, and then the other thing is that we have found that that sometimes there's use for it in other ways. In Salt Lake County, our treasurer's office found that it was very useful to have some magnets made. They put magnets on there and allowed people at tax time to drop off their taxes in that drop box. And so they were able to use it for other things. It does have a plate on it, so we lock it in between elections so that people don't get to it. So it would be a very valuable resource for the citizens of Highland, not just in August and November of this year, but like I said, March, June, and November of next year. And
So two questions for you. What's the March one?
it's a presidential primary. It's kind of the Super Tuesday that was just passed in this last legislative session.
Okay. Number two is, how is it mounted to the ground? Just bolts?
It's you pour a cement pad in there and then it's bolted into the ground.
Because depending how it's mounted, you can remove it after the election and store it. Is an option, depending how it's mounted. But I don't know how it's mounted.
My experience with them is that once they're in, they stay in.
So you're offering to put the cement pad in, to bring us a ballot, to have it here as a permanent, so Highland will be known as a permanent ballot spot for here going forward, and that you would, that when I say the county would cover the cost from now going forward into the future, is that correct?
That is correct. Now, if for any reason you decided you didn't want the curbside drop box, I can tell you that we are also negotiating with the landowners at Costco's, because I figure most of your residents are going to go to Costco, right, at some point, and they could drop their ballot there, and we would still provide you with a drop box in the city so that somebody could come in and drop their ballot off in person.
Only if we get the hot dog and drink.
Well, that's no. You're probably gonna buy that anyway.
Now, the return postage is all metered, isn't it? So that if it goes in a drop box, there would be no postage
That is
charge.
correct. So
Okay,
that's one advantage. So, you know, the 18,000, like I said, is worst case scenario, but as we implement these drop boxes, and our plan is to really market this, and the more people that use the drop box and don't send them through the mail, then that cuts our cost. Yes. And a lot of people don't trust the United States Post Office. Let's just call it what it is, okay? That can be on record. And they just feel more secure putting their ballot in a drop box, knowing that it's not going through that whole system to get back to us.
And then is it the city employee that goes and collects those ballots, or do you have a county person that comes and collects them?
We always send two people. I'm very strict with the ballot buddy rule. And so there's always two people that go and collect those ballots and bring them back to the county. He's saying 10 o'clock. Come on, Mayor, 10 o'clock.
You might think this is a silly question, but we currently have 3 drop boxes in the back. One for library books, one for the mail, one for utility bills. You would be shocked at how often those 3 are mixed up. So I'm assuming while you're implementing Buddy System, you would open up and give us all of the library books and all of the utility bills that people have put into your mailbox?
Yes. Okay. You know what, one time in Murray, we got an iPad in the ballot drop box. So we got it back to its rightful owner, too.
That's
Do you empty
impressive.
those
We
every
wanted to
day?
vote electronically.
Well, they just left it sitting someplace. Like, I think it might have fallen off the top of a car or something, and then a good citizen just dropped it in there, so.
Do you empty those every day?
Usually every other day, so we will do half the county one day. They can hold, like, I think it's between 500 and 700 ballots.
Well, my concern was Aaron's comment about how they get mixed up, and if we have utility bills in there, we don't want issues. I don't think we would, but
We can
It happens.
negotiate that.
Okay, so consensus on permanent?
what is the consensus?
Definitely the voter box. And option 3.
Option 3,
Voter box?
voter box.
Option 3, voter box.
There we go. We got 3.
Votes.
And it saves postage for Tim and Brian.
Yes.
Well, yeah, if they use it.
Oh, they will.
We'll encourage it.
They will use it.
If it's at Costco, everybody will use it.
They build it.
And I'm assuming the same postage rule applies at Costco. If it's in a voter box, irregardless of where, no postage. Yeah.
Was 1 hour.
Thank
Now, our
you,
longest
council.
item. Cindy,
Cindy, I just want you to know that all the issues that I've ever brought, I have never taken as long as you did today. Just want you to know, for the record,
no, he wants the rest of the council to know.
I'm
not-
accused of dragging these meetings out. I just want you to know, I've never had one take this long.
I will totally
Just-
I will take that, Brian.
I would debate that.
None of that.
Well, Brian?
Totally worth it.
All right, so I own the last item, so I will try and make this really quick, all right? We have to renegotiate our interlocal agreement with Alpine because Cedar Hill stepped out. We've met with...
This public safety, just for clarity.
Yes, for so this is our public safety agreement between Highland and Alpine is now invalid on, at least on the fire side. Pun intended, I guess. Fire side.
But you don't have one for us to look at tonight.
We have a draft that I will share with you, but I wanted to go over a couple considerations. One, we've met with them. We've talked about it's hard to have an even number board. The comeback was, well, we've run for years with the police department with an even number board, and it works out. Some of our residents might feel, including some members sitting here on the table, well, we're paying the lion's share of the bill. Why we should have one more vote? With 2 votes with each, what it means is we really can't proceed with anything unless we get one person from the other side to support something. So if we want to do something new, it prevents changes, right? So we can't change an allocation formula or whatever without the consent of one of the other 2 board members. We did talk about putting in the interlocal agreement a requirement if we change funding that a majority of both councils need to support the funding change request. That would limit the ability for one city, again, to impose a cost on another one. It also kind of limits change. The sense I got from talking to Mayor Stout and Mayor Sorensen was, or not Mayor Sorensen, Administrator Sorensen, was that they winced when it was a 3-2 board. They didn't like that, and I wouldn't if I was in their shoes, but I'm not in their shoes. They also winced talking about any potential change to the allocation formula. So right now it's a combination of ERUs, population, with a base cost. There was a moment of, that could work, when I said one way to do the cost allocation is to pretend like we're a district, and a district's funding mechanism is property tax, and then and it's pretty easy to get what is the taxable property in Highland and what is the taxable property in Alpine, and then just use that ratio. It's objective, it's not subjective. It is what it would be if we were a district, and I did, when I brought that up, there was, we could consider that. Then I did the numbers, and I went back 3 years, and it currently is 4258 allocation if we went that route. The allocation we're looking at with the current formula is about 3565. And so that would be a bump for them. So of course, they're not gonna like that. But to me, it is something that's defensible, because you can say, if we were a district, this is how it is, and then each city would be left up to figure out how they're gonna pay their bill. It's not requiring a city to use one method or another on how they pay their bill, but it does create some stability because you can project that going forward. You could even, if you're really concerned about variance, you could say average of the last 3 years. If you were concerned about a dramatic change, which in the last 3 years there hasn't been. It's like 41, 59, or 41 and change and 58 and change. So there isn't that much variability.
Mayor, how are you applying commercial property to that formula?
The number, the taxable property includes commercial, residential, and then if you're a business, you pay an annual property tax for the equipment that you have in your business. So it includes all three. There's a website, taxrates.utah.gov, where you can just go and look, and they itemize them and they add it up, and it's just a number that.
Are you looking at the same formula as the state where you tax 55% of residential?
Correct.
100% of commercial?
That's the number that produces is the number the county uses when they calculate the tax rate for Highland.
Okay.
So that's the number that they base their tax rate on.
So it's the taxable property.
So it's taxable property, and it does favor us 4258. But the chief pointed out that another way of looking at our district is we say, well, Alpine has a station in Alpine. They should bear the cost. We should just split those costs. We have a station, they have a station. They have a truck, we have a truck. There are arguments to be made both ways on that, and that would raise, the percentage that Alpine pays. This might end up being a way to get there that isn't as drastic or is very defensible. And I'm happy to lobby the case with them on that particular method. They're dealing with a hardship right now as they have a $2.5 million or $2.3 million judgment against them where they lost a lawsuit. And so that puts a little bit of a damper on their enthusiasm for.
I think that they need to have something that they can talk to the residents about that's defensible for both sides, and we do too. And so I really like the property tax. When you talk about the stations, I think there's some value in that if their station is covering most of their residents, then that makes sense.
But it also covers ours.
If it covers some of ours, we're also covering some of theirs.
Yeah, so it just gets squishy.
And I like something simple.
Yep.
Simple and defendable. If we were a district, that's exactly how it would come down, because they can only do property tax. And so that was the only way that it would be funded, and that's how it would work. And again, I like the idea that you said, here's your portion, here's your allocation. You decide how you want to pay it, but here's your allocation. But I think the more we act like a district, the more simplistic and the better it is for the residents. Then there's not an argument when this council is gone and the next council comes in, there's not this argument of rehashing all the same things that get rehashed every 3 to 4 years when a new council. Here it is. It's black and white, move forward. I like that.
And is there interest in saying if we're gonna do a funding change, if it's gonna be more than rate of inflation, for example, then we would need to go back and get a majority.
I think that's fair.
Which you kind of have to do anyway. We talked about doing a supermajority. I just don't know if the interlocal agreement can impose something on another city council's way that they vote. Nathan, do you want to add anything? Or Tim?
Well, I mean, it's actually the agreement between the two councils, so.
So I would like to review the agreement, and I think it would need to be approved by both councils and the
board.
The board.
So Dave Church has gone through it. We're at a place where you can look at it. So I wanted to just give you some other options to think about when you look at it. Please share them back to Nathan and Tim and myself, and I just share them with the rest of the council. So we're all talking about the same thing. It's going to be a delicate, tricky thing, but we have to have it done by July 1st, or that imposes a hard deadline on us.
Or the current agreement continues on.
Yes,
We
except
don't have,
Sands
the current one doesn't go away. It still exists. They pulled out.
We just would have to factor out Cedar Hills, so the allocation formulas would be the same. We'd have a 5-member we would have a 5-member board because we have 3 and they have 2. So there's an incentive, there's a leverage point, I guess, if you want to call that.
So I appreciate your research and thought on this. I support what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that?
I like it as well.
Okay.
Sounds good, Mayor.
All right. Anything else, Nathan? Aaron?
There's a future meeting next week, council work session. I will be out of town, but I can be on the phone.
Okay, that would be good to call into. That's where we're going to go through the public safety budget.
Ours, both budgets,
Gray,
ours.
you had dark hair last week. Now it's all gray.
Yeah, it'll be the general fund budget.
I need to be excused next week. I apologize, but I won't.
And I'm not going to be here either. I don't know how we're going to do this.
So let's talk, I'm not in town next Tuesday either, because it's something that popped up. So the 9th, I'm not here, so we probably ought to look at this.
I'm going to find somewhere to go next Tuesday.
I think we're all gone except Brian.
So let's pretend we have a meeting and Brian and I will go out to a guy flick or something.
Exactly.
It is discount too?
Don't tell my wife.
Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't our code allow for the quorum to be by electronic?
Yes.
It does.
Well, this is a work session, so it's a discussion item.
No,
I think it's going to have really diminished value if
we're
most of us aren't here.
If we're going to have 4 of you not here physically, I would not recommend holding it, even if you were here. I mean, this is a pretty important
big deal.
issue, so that's why. Not that
I'm back the next week, and I'm pretty flexible.
Not that I don't trust you guys or anything, it's just a big issue. We need to have an open conversation.
So can you guys all give Nathan some dates that we could hold this on, that you could hold it on, and I'll leave it up to him to sort it out?
Yeah.
The sooner the better,
Yes.
date-wise.
Before our next council meeting, would be really great.
Well,
this affects our budget conversations.
So hold it, you're trying to have a meeting before next city council meeting on the 16th?
Yes.
well, that would have to be this week,
No.
basically.
We have 2 weeks.
So
till
so if
Well,
everyone's,
but we're all gone the
Next
next, yeah.
what about like the 11th, Thursday night, the 11th?
We
That's when
already
they're
have an
gone,
event
so-
here. I mean, we could do it early. It's our volunteer appreciation event that I'm
Yeah,
hoping you
we're
guys
all
have on
gone
your
that
calendars.
week. Yeah, I'm gone from the 8th to the 15th. When do you get back, Kurt?
I get back on the 10th, well, the early morning of the 11th.
Could we do it Monday? Could we do it on a Monday?
Are you here on the 8th, Scott? Or are you
No, they're all
leaving?
gone
I
next
leave
week.
on the 8th. I could come home on the early of the 16th. I'll be here to city council.
Okay, so
I'm
you're
here
not there on Monday.
What if would it be a problem to hold it like on the 18th, the Thursday, the 18th?
I could do Thursday, the 18th.
We have an
Dr.
event scheduled
Madsen.
for here with Dr. Susan Madsen.
Oh, on the 18th?
On the 18th. That's
17th work,
with the 17th.
It won't work for me.
Ryan? No?
I can make it work.
Ed,
Can you make it
sorry, Ed, did
Yeah, the 17th won't work for me.
I'm not trying to single you out, Ed, or you, Scott, but I'm wondering if we can get 4 of the 5 of you and maybe 1 on the phone. Just wondering if it's not going to work with all 5.
Well, there's no way I can participate on the 15th because I'll be traveling. The 16th, I'll be
8th.
back. I can
Okay.
do the 17th, 18th. I can do anything after the 15th.
We could do the 18th. We could just
Yeah.
meet in the conference
We
room.
could do
Yeah,
that.
why don't we
or-
do that?
Yes, we could do that, yeah.
And then we can have the meeting here. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss it. I'll have to find another guest host, but anyway, we can do that if that works for everybody. Does 18th works for
Yeah.
everybody?
Yeah, 18th would be
So
great.
I'm going to,
Nathan?
is that
No,
your
that's,
board?
it's in the morning.
Yes, my wastewater treatment plant board meeting,
Oh,
affectionately called the poop plant.
Yes. Anyway,
And you always want to invade that.
yes, I do. It was the dates that I got from Dr. Madsen. She's speaks all over the world, so that was the date that worked.
Mayor, I'm out of the office on the 18th, but I'd be happy to send a substitute.
So, I mean, the only other option is come in
In the
early on
morning.
the 16th. Either before the meeting, or, I didn't know if you're going back to work, Scott, or not, and if you are, that's probably a hectic, very hectic.
So could we
day.
do it, is there something Thursday morning?
This Thursday?
No, the 18th.
On the 18th, there's nothing Thursday morning. I could do it then.
I don't think I could get away from work.
Could you call in? If
would
we,
be
depending on what time, if we started at 7:30?
We're right in the middle of our annual audit.
Oh, okay. Earlier in the day?
The Boston Marathon's on the 15th. We could celebrate that. Meet together.
It's also tax day. I'm very grouchy on that day.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, not a good day to talk about budgets.
They probably don't offset each other enough.
How about proposing days and times, and let's sort it out over the
The
next couple of
18th
days?
won't work then, is that what we're saying?
Well,
The evening of the 18th?
Brian can't make it on the 18th, and the chief can't make it on the
Oh.
18th.
Okay.
That would be important. So let's just provide some
I
dates
think
and
the
times.
chief is more important than me.
Depends on the day. But let's give Nathan some dates
Most
and
days.
times, and we'll sort it out, okay?